Deep inside the demon castle, the Demon King's guards were taking a dirt nap, a permanent one. And that's where our hero Jae-woo finally cornered his target, flashing a confident smirk at the Demon King himself. Because taking this guy down meant Jae-woo was about to get seriously paid, but right as he went for the killing blow, a system alert flashed: "You are being disconnected from the server." Seizing the opportunity, the demon Würzburg sliced the hero clean in half, while back in the real world, a couple of thugs were trashing Jae-woo's apartment. They ripped the internet cable straight from his VR pod, and when Jae-woo finally came to, he was absolutely livid. He snatched one of the goons by the collar, asking, "You got a death wish," while the other guys pleaded with Jae-woo to take it easy. They claimed they were just doing him a favor, trying to break his gaming addiction. You see, our main character used to run with this crew, where he earned a reputation as their go-to problem solver. And yeah, we're talking about those times kinds of problems. Funny thing is, he was a certified genius back in school, but he also had a talent for burning through money like it was nothing, so you could say the thugs had a point. Jae-woo roughed him up anyway, but the truth hurt. He'd sunk every single penny he had into a brand new VR capsule. He was completely obsessed with the game, Savior of Humanity. It was a game where the combat felt terrifyingly real, and the open world stretched on forever. This wasn't just about slinging spells and swords. You could build a reputation, romance, stunning NPCs, and really discover the hidden benefits of a top-tier VR pod. Even a lowly warrior could rise up to become a king. That's the very reason Jae-woo borrowed a staggering 1 billion won from these exact loan sharks. All of it just to afford this beauty, the dream machine. But now they'd kicked in his door and cost him the one massive prize that would have wiped out his entire debt in one shot. Oh, he was going to make them regret this. But one of the goons decided to speak up. "Hey buddy, we're the debt collectors here. We're the ones who are supposed to be making threats." Jae-woo just gave him a dead-eyed stare. "Go on then. I dare you." Our hero then promised them he would get them their money, but when he pulled up his bank account on his computer, the balance was basically zero. The thugs suggested he could just start working for them again, back in his old role as their personal problem solver, but Jae-woo's eyes drifted to his dream machine. He thought about the quest he had to complete in the game, and his answer was a hard no. He told them to get out. He swore he'd pay them back, but first he had a mission to finish. He jumps back into the game, spawning in the capital city, only to be hit with a penalty for his recent death in battle. A notification read, "Death penalty temporarily suspended for 22 hours. Frustrated, Jae-woo had no idea how he was supposed to earn any cash now. Just then, someone walked up to him and said, "It looks like you're in a bit of a jam." As the girl approached, our protagonist asked. He demands to know who she is, and the girl introduces herself as Aquila, the Game Master of Savior of Humanity. Jae-woo is in disbelief, finding it hard to accept that a little kid could possibly be the Game Master. But she quickly warns him not to judge a book by its cover. Jae-woo fires back that he can't just take her word for it that she's Aquila. In response, Aquila simply snaps her fingers and instantly everyone around them freezes in time. Our protagonist immediately recognizes this as a time-stopping spell, an SSS-rank ability, at the very least. Aquila clarifies that it's not an ability, she just temporarily crashed the server. She smugly states that this little demonstration should be more than enough to make him a believer. Anyway, Aquila brings up a special event she's planned for the game's 7th anniversary, asking Jae-woo if he's interested. Right on cue, a system announcement pops up declaring that a new game world has just opened. Aquila challenges our hero to be the very first to clear this new world with a brand new character. Jae-woo protests that he's not done with his current character, but Aquila reveals the reward is a whopping 25 billion. She then adds a little jab, saying she'd understand if he was too scared to take on the challenge. That's all it takes to get under his skin. Aquila then says she knows all about his search for, and the game's true ending, hinting that he might just find what he's looking for in this new world. She then materializes an object, claiming it holds the very clues he needs to reach the game's ending. Jae-woo is completely mesmerized by the sight. Aquila sweetens the deal, saying if he accepts now, he'll get a bonus. A quick glance at his system shows Jae-woo that Aquila has already sent 30 million won straight to his account. The girl explains that since Jae-woo is her VIP, it's only right that she sponsors him. With that kind of cash up front, our protagonist figures that even if he doesn't clear the game, it's still a massive win. After all, this amount alone is more than enough to cover his interest payments for the month. There's no way he can refuse an offer this good. He'd have to be a total idiot to pass it up. Aquila says she expected as much, and that she'll send him over to the new map right now. With that, she starts manipulating the game's core programming right before his very eyes. Inside this game, it's clear she wields the power of an actual deity. As the expansion begins to install, the entire landscape around them starts to warp and shift. A few moments later, they're left standing alone in front of a single imposing door. Aquila explains that as soon as he steps through that doorway, Jae-woo will be in the new world. Realizing all he has to do is walk through, our hero wastes no time and makes a beeline for the door. But just before crossing the threshold, he looks back and tells Aquila not to flake on the reward she promised. And with that, he takes the plunge, heading straight for the true ending. Just then, Aquila casually mentions she left out one tiny detail. She explains that if his character kicks the bucket in this world, he's a goner in real life too. Jae-woo is completely freaked out by this news, but there's no turning back now. He's already stepped through the portal. The moment he materializes in the new world, he immediately eats dirt, face-planting hard. He's confused, wondering why he's feeling actual pain when this is supposed to be just a game. Then it hits him. He remembers what Aquila said and realizes her warning was dead serious. So Jae-woo figures he has only one option: beat the game without dying. Still, he's absolutely livid with Aquila for totally playing him like that. Kicking things off with a brand new character, Jae-woo is starting from scratch with 0 items, not even a drop of water. He's forced to drag himself through a desolate forest, cursing Aquila for getting him into this mess. A quick check of his stats confirms his fears. His new character is a total weakling with barely any HP. On top of that, he's been trekking for 12 straight hours without any water and is seriously dehydrated. It's becoming crystal clear that his plan to beat the game is going to be way tougher than he ever imagined. But just as he's about to lose all hope, he hears the unmistakable sound of running water nearby. Not wasting a single second, he bolts in the direction of the sound. As luck would have it, Jae-woo finds a stream, feeling like he's in an episode of a Bear Grylls survival show. At this point, our hero is so exhausted he doesn't even have the energy to hate Aquila anymore. All he wants is a drink. But just as he gets to the stream, Jae-woo's eyes lock onto a woman standing right in front of him. Turns out she's taking a bath right there in the water. He's completely stunned, his jaw practically on the floor, making no effort to hide how captivated he is by her beauty. For a good long moment, all he can do is stare. But just as he leans in for a better view, a system notification pops up telling him he needs to purchase a DLC. Jae-woo is instantly enraged. A VIP having to pay for DLC, seriously. He was under the impression that his status gave him full access to the entire new map. All of a sudden, he's surrounded by more women who inform him that to see the premium content he's going to have to pay up. Practically drooling, Jae-woo asks, "So how much?" And the next thing he knows, he's been captured. After getting dragged away, a witch calls him a total creep and tells him not to make a move. She then adds that if he plays nice, maybe they'll let him keep his clothes on. But Jae-woo, still completely hung up on the DLC he couldn't get, just asks again, "But seriously, how much is it?" Another captured man gives him a confused look. "What in the world are you talking about?" the man asks. The guy introduces himself as Rude, a professional monster hunter. Our protagonist replies that his name is Valor, and asks how a hunter like him got caught. Rude sighs, explaining it was just a case of terrible luck. He was tracking his prey and made the mistake of stopping too close to the witch's forest. He then asks if Valorstead ran into some bad luck too, and our hero admits he did. The hunter feels bad for Valorstead, pointing out that he looks really young to be in this mess. But Valorstead just brushes it off, assuring him it's no big deal and that breaking out of spots like this is his specialty. He even brags that he's already got a brilliant escape plan in mind. It suddenly hits Jae-woo. He's the one who literally wrote the book on how to take down these exact witches. It took him 3 whole days to put that guide together. In it, he detailed the 5 witches: Havel, Gunda, Kaldura, Aldaida, Fugel, and Haeju. Even though they're just early game bosses, thousands of players have been wiped out by them, making the witches pretty infamous. But if you really pay attention, you'll see they're a completely dysfunctional crew. And Jae-woo knows that to get out of here, he has to use that chaos against them. So he turns to Lady Fugel and casually remarks, "Wow, I'm surprised you're still breathing." He mentions hearing Lady Haeju say she was planning on taking her out for good. Hearing this, Fugel completely loses it. She instantly turns on her fellow witch, exactly as our hero predicted, since he knew they couldn't stand each other. Pushing the button further, Jae-woo adds that Haeju planned to get rid of her and swipe all her stuff. "Is that true?" Fugel demands. Haeju snaps back that she shouldn't be listening to some prisoner. Then she adds that Fugel couldn't possibly spend all that cash she just got, so she'd better share the wealth. I mean, it's not like she isn't always eyeing her colleagues' things anyway. Aldaida, completely clueless about the tension in the room, chimes in. "Oh, that must be why Haeju is cooking up an acid bomb." Meanwhile, Gunda, who's only thinking about her stomach, asks, "So when are we gonna eat?" And Kaldura, always down for a fight, yells, "If there's gonna be a throwdown, count me in." It doesn't take long before they're all at each other's throats. Our protagonist smirks. His plan worked like a charm. He knows a key weakness: while the witches are technically a team, they're constantly at each other's throats. It's a fatal oversight that gets most players wiped out by this coven. But Jae-woo, armed with this critical piece of intel, holds a major advantage. As the chaos of the fight escalates, he signals to Rudd that this is their perfect chance to bail. But before they bolt, he decides he wants to pull a little stunt on the witches. So true to his word, Jae-woo gives them a hard tug, sending the whole coven tumbling headfirst into a cauldron. With his prank complete, he points Rudd toward the way out. Jae-woo had no intention of leaving without actually finishing the job. After all, as clueless as they are, they're worth a hefty amount of XP. However, just when he thought they were home free, Fugel's snake lashed out and snagged his leg. The witch screams that she's not going down alone and plans on dragging our hero with her. In that moment, Han Jae-woo remembered that his current character is pathetically weak, making it impossible for him to just break free. But without a moment's hesitation, Rudd springs to his rescue. He quickly draws his weapon and slices right through the snake. The protagonist thanks him for the save and quickly gets back on his feet. The very next second, he asks if he can borrow Rudd's bow. Rudd obliges, handing it over while asking if he's any good with it. Han Jae-woo simply replies, "I'm decent enough." With that, he fires an arrow straight at a jar suspended above the cauldron. As it shatters, the jar's entire contents rain down on the witches below. One of the witches gasps in horror, realizing that the jar was filled with acid, and she knows that once it mixes with the brew in the cauldron, it's going to trigger a massive explosion. The horrified witches can only watch, completely helpless to stop the inevitable. A moment later, a gigantic explosion tears through their lair. Luckily, Han Jae-woo and Rudd manage to dive out of there just in the nick of time. Rudd turns to him, asking if that explosion really took care of them for good. After a quick check of his system notifications, the protagonist confirms that it did. He silently thinks to himself that they got incredibly lucky, especially since he's still at such a low level. Rudd admits he had completely lost hope of making it out alive and sincerely thanks Han Jae-woo for everything. As a way of showing his immense gratitude, he tells the protagonist he wants to give him a gift. Han Jae-woo is handed some red dragon fruit cuffs, and he's absolutely ecstatic. He can't remember ever seeing anything like these in all his past playthroughs. Rudd explains that they looked pretty valuable, so he just went ahead and swiped them from the witches. Without a second thought, Han Jae-woo snatches the items and downs them all in one go. And just like that, a system notification pops up. He's now a dragon bone, wielding an incredible amount of power. Han Jae-woo can only watch in awe as his stats shoot through the roof. A normal player couldn't even dream of getting an item this good right at the start, making him think his luck is finally turning around. Sensing some real potential in our protagonist, Rudd extends an invitation for him to become a hunter. And with that offer, the protagonist's system dings, alerting him that he's unlocked a friendly relationship route with a monster hunter. As tempting as the offer was, our protagonist turns it down, explaining that he's already got other plans in the works. Rudd notes that he seems like a busy guy, but then it hits Han Jae-woo this is a golden opportunity. The thing is, his current character doesn't have a class yet. All that massive experience he just gained had nowhere to be allocated and would just disappear if he didn't use it, so he figures why not give being a hunter a shot. So he asks Rudd if 3 months would be enough time. Rudd immediately shuts that down, saying it would take 3 years at the absolute minimum. So he asks Rudd if 3 months would be enough time. The hunter gives him a 30-minute head start before the search begins. It dawns on Han Jae-woo that the hunter must have a tracking skill for hunting monsters, but he gets the feeling Rudd is underestimating him, treating him like any other target. After all, Han Jae-woo knows this forest like the back of his hand, having explored it countless times before. He remembers every little detail, including all the secret hiding spots. He knows how the dense trees can mess with your sense of direction, and on top of that, poisonous spores from toxic mushrooms are all over the place. Not to mention the forest is crawling with ferocious beasts that are way more dangerous than those witches. Our protagonist has already gone up against most of them, and thanks to those fruits, his physical stats are nearly maxed out. With all these advantages, he's confident the hunter won't be able to find him that easily. But it doesn't take long for Han Jae-woo to realize just how wrong he was. Rudd finds him in almost no time at all. Rudd simply tells our protagonist he needs to try harder. But he does add that because of his passion and effort, he'll give him 10 bonus points. Han Jae-woo is stunned and asks, "How in the world did you find me so fast?" Rudd replied that it had been a long time since he'd found a student this interesting. He then told him to keep up the great work from here on out. The protagonist's system pinged him. The hunter's hazing quest was now complete. A new quest, Hunter's Taunts, had just kicked off. After spending some time as a hunter in training, Han Jae-woo had picked up several new skills. He realized that teaming up with Rudd hadn't been a bad call at all. 3 months later, he had absorbed a ton of knowledge. At the camp, Rudd asked if the protagonist had truly mastered everything he'd been taught. Han Jae-woo shot back that if the hunter didn't believe him, he could go hide anywhere in the forest. Rudd remarked that the kid's fighting spirit always amazed him, so he'd take him up on the offer. But he added, "If you can't find me in 1 hour, you're on dinner duty." Han Jae-woo accepted the challenge, totally pumped for what was about to go down. A little while later, while hiding, Rudd mused that he had finally found an apprentice with some real potential. Still, he figured he shouldn't make things too hard on the kid. The hunter was confident that by hiding on a cliff for 1 hour, he would easily remain undetected by his apprentice. However, as he was climbing the mountain, Han Jae-woo snatched his leg, scaring the daylights out of him. After that, Rudd tried to conceal himself among the trees but was found in a flash. He tried hiding in multiple locations, yet was discovered every single time without fail. Before long, he was left wondering how someone could learn techniques in just 3 months that took him 5 whole years to master. As a last resort, Rudd tried to hide in a cave. This, he thought, was his last foolproof escape route. He was positive he wouldn't be found in here. After all, it was known as the Lair of the Hellhound, yet the protagonist managed to surprise him even there. Guardian of Humanity tip number 1, he stated, is that not even an earthquake can wake a sleeping hellhound. With that, he asked his master, "So do I pass the test?" Still stunned, all Rudd could say was, "Yeah." Outside the cave, Rudd confessed that he hadn't anticipated such incredible progress. The protagonist in turn humbly said he just had a good teacher. Jae-woo knew it was actually thanks to his system, but he wasn't about to tell Rudd that. He let the hunter think all the credit was his. Still, Rudd couldn't help but praise his student's performance, remarking that on top of his natural talent, he possessed an incredible memory. Rudd even confessed that he'd never encountered anyone quite like him in all his years. Because of this, he was convinced that the protagonist was destined for great things. With the training session wrapped up, Rudd questioned if his student planned to move forward with the task he had brought up before. Jae-woo explained that his first priority was to make some cash before continuing on his journey. Hearing this, Rudd brought up a close buddy of his who worked as a mercenary and asked if the protagonist might be interested in joining up. To Jae-woo, the offer actually sounded pretty appealing. After all, it seemed like a solid way to earn some seed money. What's more, joining was free and the work schedule was completely flexible. And on top of that, if luck was on his side, he might even run into the game's guardians. Considering all the perks, he decided to take the job. Rudd then gave the protagonist a mercenary insignia, assuring him that this token would get him accepted by his friend without any questions. The seasoned hunter said his goodbyes to the protagonist, wishing him the best of luck on the road ahead. Jae-woo reflected on his progress, thinking that taking down the witches and unlocking a class was a fantastic start to the game. He felt that at this pace a happy ending might not be just a pipe dream anymore. Ultimately, Jae-woo's main objective was to uncover the game's true ending. He recalled that the only reason he'd accepted Aquila's deal was her promise to give him clues leading to the finale. But beyond that, Jae-woo believed the real thrill of this game was the constant uncertainty of when he might meet his end. He was determined to fully embrace that high-stakes tension. That's why he was so eager to meet up with Aquila again and finally get his hands on the true ending. And speak of the devil, Aquila was watching everything unfold from a distance, clearly amused by the protagonist's journey. It was becoming crystal clear to her that picking Jae-woo as her VIP was the perfect call. Just then, another woman approached her and commented that Jae-woo was clearly no ordinary guy. Aquila playfully teased, asking if her colleague had a crush on him or something. Valpergus shot back that she was a goddess after all. She insisted there was no reason for her to look at a mere human she was tasked with protecting in that kind of way. Aquila couldn't see the problem, admitting that she personally thought Jae-woo was pretty cute. She then pointed out how serious Valpergus had been lately, reminiscing about a time when she used to be a lot more fun. Valpergus just scoffed, saying that was a long time ago. Quickly changing the subject, she asked, "So did you actually pay off Jae-woo's debt?" Aquila admitted it was true, so Valpergus pushed for more answers. So why in the world was Jae-woo kept completely in the dark? The poor guy still thinks he's working his tail off to pay back some made-up debt. Aquila simply replied that it was just more entertaining watching him struggle with such vigor. Valpergus shot back, calling Aquila a monster for toying with someone's life. She then demanded to know if Jae-woo was just a pawn in some grander scheme, or was he nothing more than her latest plaything? Aquila corrected her, saying Jae-woo was more like a promising new talent, and she added he was one she planned on watching very closely. Back with our hero, his legs were finally screaming for a break, forcing him to sit down. He grumbled to himself that this relentless forest was absolutely draining him. He was so exhausted he could have slept for 12 hours straight, but he knew stopping wasn't an option. The mercenary guild was right around the corner. After finally reaching Frankfurt, he walked into the Francois Tavern and was greeted warmly by the waitresses. He mentioned he was on the lookout for someone, and a waitress immediately offered to set him up at a table. As Jae-woo settled in, he quickly realized this tavern was the perfect hub for gathering intel. It was a classic joint overflowing with good food and plenty to drink. He knew that loose lips sink ships, especially when folks are happy, making it the best place to ask about the mercenary guild. Besides, he couldn't help but notice the waitresses were pretty easy on the eyes. Taking full advantage of the friendly vibe, Jae-woo casually asked if they knew a guy named Rebus Chaltz. The moment that name left his mouth, the entire atmosphere in the tavern went ice cold. One waitress urgently warned him that you don't say that name out loud in here. Another quickly added that the man he was asking for was beyond dangerous. She explained that her own boyfriend got tangled up with Rebus Chaltz and came back looking like a walking mummy. Apparently, anyone else who crossed him met a similar gruesome fate. Our hero could only wonder what kind of insane mess Rudd had thrown him into. The waitress begged him to run while he still could, warning that the psycho could show up any minute. But in a cruel twist of fate, her very attempt to save him pushed him directly into the line of fire. Rebus Chaltz spotted our hero from across the room, noticed Rudd's insignia, and declared, "Well, you must be the one I've been hearing about." He then added with a smirk that the timing couldn't be better as he was just looking for a new partner. But Jae-woo wasn't fooled. He knew this was a complete setup and couldn't figure out why Rudd would throw him into such a mess. After a quick chat with Rebus Chaltz, our hero pieced it together he was being shipped off to the war between the Elector Prince and Pezamut's forces. But Jae-woo wasn't born yesterday. He quickly figured out he was actually being sold off as a slave to some foreign army. Instead of making a run for it, however, he saw a golden opportunity in all this. You see, the Elector Prince was a game guardian, one of the legendary electors of Paltz. Jae-woo believed that getting close to him was the key to gathering intel on the other guardians. Moments later, a trumpet rang out. Perfect timing, Rebus Chaltz exclaimed. The prince has finally arrived. As the cavalry rode past them, Rebus Chaltz remarked that Jae-woo would fit right in with their crew. Our protagonist, however, felt this was a far cry from what he had expected. Laying eyes on the Elector Prince, he thought the man gave off some serious villain vibes. But the biggest bombshell dropped when Jae-woo saw who was riding at the prince's side, Lady Valpergus herself. The prince glanced over at her, asking if something was wrong, noticing she seemed a million miles away. The lady simply replied that there was nothing to worry about. And with that, they all continued their march toward the battlefield. Valpergus had been his trusted battle companion in all of his previous playthroughs. He was still haunted by the fact he could never manage to save her when things got dangerous. Every single time the story ended the exact same way, with her dying. Rebus Chaltz noticed his uneasy expression and asked, "Hey, is something bugging you?" Jae-woo said no, but in his mind he made a vow. This time, even if I have to put my life on the line, I will find an ending where Valpergus survives. A little while later, they arrived at the training grounds. Watching the others go at it, our hero concluded the training was seriously intense. Rebs explained they were picking squad leaders by having everyone fight it out. And to top it off, there was prize money on the line. Pride and money, two things that were the perfect motivation for our hero. But he reminded himself his only real mission was to get in touch with the Elector Prince. Keeping a low profile was definitely the smartest move. Rebs, however, was dead set on getting him into the trials. He argued that Rudd wouldn't have sent him if he didn't believe the kid had real potential. So he called out to his men, asking who wanted to be the first to take on the newcomer. Right away, a bunch of guys volunteered to take on the protagonist, leaving him backed into a corner with no way to say no. So figuring he was stuck fighting anyway, he decided he absolutely could not afford to lose, even if it meant tapping into his power. His first opponent stepped up and introduced himself as Max. The guy scoffed at our hero, boasting that with a scrawny frame like that, one good hit would be all it took to put him down. With both fighters ready to go, Reeves called out to see if they were set. Once they confirmed, he gave the signal and Max immediately lunged at the protagonist. But in just a single blow, Max was completely shut down. To the absolute shock of all his buddies, Jae-woo ended the fight with just one clean strike. This left the other mercenaries completely speechless. After all, Max was supposed to be one of their strongest fighters. But much to the protagonist's surprise, this display of power didn't scare the others off in the slightest. In fact, it had the opposite effect, making them even more eager to get a piece of him. This was the last thing Jae-woo wanted, but he ended up getting challenged by pretty much every single mercenary there. So he had no choice but to take them all down one by one, using the opportunity to grind some points for his attributes. Then another challenger stepped forward, introducing himself as Charlotte. He boasted that unlike the others, he wasn't about to get shown up by some newcomer. He walked right up to the protagonist, laughing at how small he was in comparison. Jae-woo figured it was a good time to call it a day, but he was about to find out the hard way that wasn't an option. He checked, but the option to log out of the game was completely gone. He knew right away that this had to be Aquila's doing. All he wanted was to catch his breath for a few minutes before continuing, but even that choice had been taken from him. With no way out, he realized he'd have to face his next opponent. He figured since there was nowhere to run, he might as well do this right and end it quickly. So Jae-woo hit his opponent with a perfect judo throw, slamming the big man to the ground in an instant. Even as he laid Charlotte out cold, Jae-woo couldn't help but think the guy was surprisingly heavy. Seeing Charlotte taken down so easily managed to impress even the mercenary leader Reeves. This just made the others even more hyped to test the protagonist's strength for themselves, much to Jae-woo's growing frustration. Just then, Reeves stepped in and ordered the other men to back off from the newcomer. Jae-woo was thrilled, thinking he was finally going to get a break. But then Reeves declared that the protagonist was their champion, dubbing him Valorstead Valor and making him the new group leader for the coming battle. And just like that, the mercenary group began preparing for war, with a reluctant protagonist forced to lead them into what was sure to be a chaotic battlefield. Reeves gives the order for his army to charge. Without a moment's hesitation, the mercenaries rush their enemies, only to be met by the menacing glare of an opposing troll army. Jae-woo doesn't waste a second. He dives headfirst into the chaotic fray, launching a relentless assault. As far as he's concerned, he's now officially fighting alongside the Elector Prince's forces. Reeves had already explained that their conflict was with the Orc army led by the Demon King Pezamut. Their mission, deceptively simple: snatch the enemy commander's military flag. The plan was to punch through the enemy formation, exploit the opening, and then completely crush their defensive lines. But Reeves had given his men a serious warning. Orcs are fiercely proud and powerful, and they fight with outstanding coordination. Reeves had specifically tasked Valorstead Valor with leading their unit and halting the enemy's advance cold. Back on the battlefield, our protagonist finds the idea of leading a mercenary group completely ridiculous. After all, his real plan was to score some military points and then make a clean getaway. A short time later, an orc soldier rushes to his captain, reporting that their spearmen are being completely torn apart. The captain refuses to hear it, insisting that his spearmen are elite warriors. Annoyed, he grabs a spyglass to see what's really going on. But as he scans the battlefield, he's stunned by the sight of the mercenary group being led by our protagonist. The captain immediately barks orders for his soldiers to form firing lines and align their muskets. A moment later, they unleash a volley of gunfire on the humans. Jae-woo smirks to himself, thinking that using muskets is a pretty inefficient tactic. They take way too long to reload and have to constantly rotate their lines. The very instant the enemy switches their firing line, the protagonist yells that now is their chance to attack. Leading his group, he charges forward, trampling right over their enemies. One of the orcs can't believe his eyes. His soldiers are being wiped out by such a pathetic-looking human. Regardless, he knows he has to be the one to stop the human's charge. After all, he's the one holding the sacred flag that carries his tribe's proud history. The orc carrying the flag never stood a chance. In the end, the mercenary group came out on top. Our protagonist had successfully captured the banner for his unit. He knows he just needs to hang in there a little longer to earn the military merit he's after. Suddenly, an ally rushes toward him with a major problem. Instead of pushing forward, the rest of the army is in a full-blown retreat. As if that wasn't bad enough, a fresh wave of orc reinforcements just arrived, throwing the protagonist into a complete panic. He was sure victory was just within his grasp and can't figure out why everyone else is fleeing. One of his men looks to him and asks, "So what's our move?" Their whole squad is now surrounded, completely cut off from the main force. On the orc side, their concealed leader, the great General Kalyan, commands the courageous human warriors to surrender. He declares that if they back off now and leave the flag, he'll respect their courage and spare their lives. But the protagonist scoffs, retorting that an orc's word means absolutely nothing to him. In fact, he plans on putting their banner to very good use, which causes a furious Kalyan to roar in anger. "How dare you attempt to defile our sacred banner?" Jae-woo simply states that in war there are no rules. To win this battle, he and his men are prepared to do whatever it takes. With that final taunt, our hero successfully provokes the entire orc army. The orcs immediately snap into formation, and Kalyan screams the order to fire. The humans are instantly at a disadvantage, caught in a hail of enemy fire. The protagonist's system alerts him. His attempt at intimidation was a failure. Jae-woo is baffled, having no idea why it didn't work. After all, that exact tactic had worked every single time in the game before. Regardless, he and his squad are now taking heavy enemy fire. His men are quickly losing any hope they had for victory. The enemy has a legendary general, and they don't believe they can possibly withstand an attack from someone as strong as Kalyan. Even the protagonist himself is at a complete loss for what to do. Then he's hit by a sudden flashback of all his previous battles. He remembers the chilling fact that if he dies here, it's game over for him in the real world too. Jae-woo is shell-shocked, completely overwhelmed by this sudden realization. To make matters worse, his men are pleading with him for an order, telling him they'll all be wiped out if he doesn't do something. Instead of giving a command, the protagonist starts laughing maniacally, convincing his men that he's completely lost it. But Jae-woo simply calls out for Charlotte's trumpet. An ally immediately points out that blowing the trumpet is pointless as no reinforcements will come. Yet the protagonist confidently insists that he knows exactly what he's doing. So he blasts the trumpet with every ounce of strength he has. A comrade points out that he's signaling in the complete opposite direction of their retreat. Jae-woo shoots back that he knows, telling his allies to just keep holding the line. In his mind, he's praying that if Aquila has any sense of honor, she won't dare abandon him now. After all, he's a person of great importance. Over on the enemy's side, the orc general orders his spear-wielding troops to advance. All of a sudden, a single enemy warrior breaks from the pack and charges straight at the humans. He levels his spear, aiming it right for our protagonist. But before the spear can find its mark, the attacker is suddenly struck by an unseen force. Then a new figure is seen approaching the battlefield. It's none other than Valpergus, arriving majestically mounted on a unicorn. Having heard the trumpet's call, she rallies the human soldiers, inspiring them to fight on. She commands all the soldiers to keep their swords at the ready. Declaring that this battle is far from over, she catches the attention of the orc leader, who tells his own soldiers not to interfere. He identifies her as the Countess of Niederbayern and declares that the conflict has now become a duel between nobles. Valpergus compliments the general on his honesty, but calls him unworthy all the same. With that, she immediately charges her opponent, and a fierce battle erupts between them. Our protagonist watches the duel unfold, completely mesmerized by the spectacle. Even though this is still the early part of the story, Valpergus is already unbelievably powerful. Back in the duel, the orc general is clearly struggling to keep up. Valpergus is showing her opponent absolutely no mercy. She continues to press her attack with relentless force, but the orc is proving to be incredibly durable. Her opponent remarks that the Countess possesses more than just excellent sword skills. He's also forced to admire her impressive skills in close-quarters combat. He speculates that she must be Valpergus' sister, noting that her connection to that famous military order would then make perfect sense. Valpergus simply states that she serves God with her entire being, adding that she hates to waste time. She then immediately renews her assault. The orc general starts to relish the challenge, striking back with furious intensity, desperate to land a hit. However, Valpergus is simply too fast for him. She effortlessly sidesteps the enemy's blow and launches a devastating counterattack. Staggering from the hit, the orc declares that it was an excellent fight. In the next instant, he's on the ground utterly defeated. Seeing their captain fall, his men know the battle is lost and begin to retreat, carrying their fallen leader with them. Our protagonist is blown away, stunned that such a formidable captain could be taken down with just one hit. He finally understands that this must be the true, overwhelming power of Lady Valpergus. Valpergus then walks up to him and asks, "Are you the one in charge of these mercenaries?" She tells him she could sense his bravery from a distance before giving him a formal introduction. Our hero introduces himself as Valorstead Valor and returns the greeting. He makes it clear that if she hadn't arrived when she did, every last one of them would be dead by now. In his head, though, he reminds himself that he's not playing his Steel Elector character anymore, so he has to watch his step. Just then, the rest of his crew comes over, letting him know they've got something for him. They present the captured enemy banner to Valorstead. Valor, after all, he is their leader. This move instantly skyrockets our protagonist's reputation with the other mercenaries. Jae-woo thinks back on the brutal fight they just survived, and realizing how close he came to death, he hoists the banner high, celebrating and claiming it as his own. A little while later at the Francois Tavern, a young girl shows up asking for Charlotte, and he's immediately captivated by her. The girl spots his injuries and asks, "Did you go off to another war?" Curious, our protagonist wonders aloud, "Is this Charlotte's daughter?" But one of the mercs chimes in, explaining that no, this is Charlotte's 15-year-old younger sister, Baptiste. The girl immediately starts chewing him out, blaming him for her brother's injuries and demanding he pay for Charlotte's medical bills. Charlotte, however, jumps in to say that it's thanks to their leader that any of them made it back alive. Everyone else backs up the story, insisting that their leader single-handedly saved them from being orc chow. Completely embarrassed, our protagonist just tells them all to shut up and eat. Right at that moment, Valpergus herself walks into the tavern and every single eye in the place turns to her. Jae-woo is absolutely floored. The last person he ever expected to see in a place like this was the Countess. A short time later, she escorts our protagonist to the forward operating base at Harfheim. Valpergus explains that the Steel Elector himself has summoned him, apparently wanting to award him with military honors. She tells our hero that this is a huge deal, since it's the highest honor a mercenary could possibly receive. Jae-woo can't help but think that Valpergus isn't quite how he remembered her. In fact, she seems way more hyped about this honor than he is. The Countess points out the nearby soldiers, explaining they were all saved because of him, and that without his courage, not a single one would have made it. It wasn't just that. These were citizens of the Empire alive because of him, which is why her smile was so genuine. This triggers a forgotten memory for our hero, a time when Valpergus protected him during a very bizarre situation. He realizes she hasn't fundamentally changed at all, only their relationship is in a different place now. After all, in this life he's just a mercenary and she's a high-born noble. Valpergus then approaches His Majesty and formally introduces the protagonist. The Steel Elector says he's delighted to finally meet the celebrated Valor, introducing himself simply as Philip. Jae-woo bows before the nobleman, thinking that the presence of a true ruler is incredibly powerful. Philip notes that the protagonist has become known as the Death of the Battlefield. He declares that the protagonist's courage is unbelievable, his bravery lion-like, and that such a man must be rewarded. With that, he announces he will grant the mercenaries' companions around 100 florins, and for the protagonist, 300 florins. Jae-woo states that he will one day repay this generosity, but adds that he has a request of his own. He would like permission to regroup with his comrades and rest in the city of Wittenbeer. Even though Wittenbeer is a long way off, Philip allows it and even grants him a vacant shed to use as he pleases. Furthermore, he asks if there is anything else the protagonist requires. Jae-woo thinks that he would normally say no, but faced with this unexpected opportunity, he glances at Valpergus and an idea sparks. He then boldly states that he has a personal question for His Majesty. Philip simply tells him to speak his mind. So the protagonist asks what the Steel Elector truly thinks about the ongoing war. Philip takes a moment to process the question, and a tense silence falls over the room. Just as Jae-woo expected, everyone was completely baffled by his audacity. After all, he was nothing more than a common mercenary. Philip, in turn, flips the question right back at the protagonist. Jae-woo admits his viewpoint is limited, but there's one thing in particular that has captured his attention. One of the nobles present scoffs, asking if he thinks one military achievement makes him qualified to advise them on the war. Another noble chimes in, claiming the protagonist must have just heard some gossip and is worrying over nothing. However, hearing this, Valpergus immediately speaks up in the protagonist's defense. She says it's wrong to judge a book by its cover, then urges His Majesty to listen to what the young mercenary has to say. Philip's uncle calls Valpergus audacious for speaking to his nephew with such familiarity. But Philip himself interjects that Valpergus is the niece of the Elector of Byron, so his uncle should show the Countess more respect. Just as the protagonist predicted, even the Elector of Steel can't afford to disregard Valpergus. Philip finally agrees to hear what the mercenary has to say. So what's your take on this war, he asks. Jae-woo flat out declares that an ambush is on its way. Philip immediately questions him, asking how he could make such a bold claim. Jae-woo lays it out, explaining that the Demon King Pezamut's signature strategy has always been built on ambushes and betrayals. He points to the 10-year war with the Toe Kingdom and the 6-year battle against Margrave Anhat, noting that in both conflicts, Pezamut's underhanded tactics were what won the day. Because of this history, the protagonist asserts that they can't be too cautious about betrayals and similar traps. These words clearly strike a nerve with Philip. He then demands to know, "Are you accusing one of my men of being a traitor?" Jae-woo clarifies that he's merely considering the possibility, believing there's no harm in being extra cautious. Philip seems to agree with the sentiment, but adds that the mercenary is incredibly bold for speaking so freely. Clearly irritated, he retorts that the only reason the mercenary's head is still on his shoulders is because he's allowed it to be. With that, he orders the protagonist to know his place. Valpergus immediately tries to step in on the protagonist's behalf. However, Jae-woo himself is the one who backs down. He apologizes for his mistake, and then asks to be dismissed from the noble's presence. As he's leaving, Jae-woo thinks to himself that the Elector of Steel used to be much more cautious. This time, however, he was just arrogant, and Jae-woo has no idea why. The one thing he's absolutely certain of is that something is very wrong this time. First off, the red dragon fruits, which were supposed to show up much later, appeared way ahead of schedule. On top of that, Valpergus, who was also meant to appear later in the timeline, arrived much sooner than anticipated. With all these changes, the protagonist concludes that this timeline is completely different from the last one. While he's lost in thought, Valpergus suddenly calls out to him. It turns out she had run just to catch up to him. You certainly walk fast, she comments. Jae-woo then asks if she chased after him because she was worried. She confirms that she was, and then apologizes on behalf of Philip for what he said. Not only that, but she also offers to help him in any way she can. All this goodwill coming from the Countess leaves Jae-woo feeling a bit embarrassed. He gets lost in thought over her offer to do anything for him, letting his imagination run completely wild. At the same time, though, he knows deep down that it's just a pipe dream. So instead, he asks her for something else entirely, a quill and a pistol. Valpergus seems taken aback, asking if that's truly all he wants. She reminds him that she doesn't normally make herself available like this to just anybody. Jae-woo explains that his dream is to become a knight, and he plans to use those items to master horsemanship. Hearing this, Valpergus admits that she's never met anyone quite as remarkable as him. She then adds that this is no place for such a conversation, and decides to take him somewhere more private. Seeing Lady Valpergus act so cheerfully makes the protagonist's own eyes light up with joy. A while later, on the battlefield of Harfheim Peak, the Elector of Steel's army stands ready to face the soldiers of Demon King Pezamut. Philip roars at his foe, declaring that today is the day he will fall. However, Pezamut simply scoffs at his adversary's confidence. One of his commanders approaches, reporting that all war preparations have been completed. He also takes the chance to mention that using that woman might be a bad idea, but the Demon Lord completely disagrees. His ally argues that this woman is simply too cruel for the job. If they manage to capture the Elector, he'll be an extremely valuable hostage. For that reason, they can't entrust a prize like that to a complete lunatic. The Demon Lord claims he's well aware of the risks and promises to take every precaution. Speaking of the woman, she materializes at that very moment, approaching her lord. He tells his servant she does excellent work, but asks her to take it easy on this one. She replies with a smirk that she always knows just how far she can push things. However, the Demon Lord bluntly tells her that isn't true at all. Even so, she insists that she has never once crossed the line up to this point. At this, the Demon Lord thinks to himself that she's actually right about that. He doesn't even want to begin to imagine what would happen if she ever truly went all out. Back with our protagonist, he's currently training with his horse Philly. The steed's name is Philly, and he's blessed with incredible speed. Jae-woo figures that for a dueling horse, Philly is the perfect caliber for the young lady of House Byron, who even gifted him a priceless potion that can completely regenerate anyone who drinks it. All of a sudden, a massive explosion rocks the area, startling the protagonist. He shouts that the battle has already begun and that he needs to move quickly. He understands that in this critical moment there is a very real possibility that Philly is about to be betrayed. Because Philly ignored all the warnings, he's about to discover the hard way that his uncle is a traitor, secretly allied with the enemy, as the uncle scoffs, telling Philly he simply doesn't understand. He accuses his own nephew of masterminding a conspiracy, turning the rebels against the emperor. The moment he uncovered this plot, he says he chose to join forces with Pezamut. By his logic, this makes the Steel Elector the real traitor all along. After laying out this twisted story, the old man asks his nephew if he understands, but Philip just scoffs back, claiming no one would ever fall for such a ridiculous lie. But the demon lord isn't having it and slams Philip to the ground, warning him to drop the defiant attitude. He calls the boy a lunatic for refusing to accept the so-called reality of the situation. With that, he commands his underlings to seize his opponent. Terrified, Philip shouts that he's a nobleman and that none of them better dare lay a hand on him. Just as the goons move in to grab him, Valpergus closes in completely unnoticed. She announces her arrival by slamming a powerful kick right into the demon lord. And she didn't come alone. She immediately orders her soldiers to get His Majesty out of the danger zone. The demon lord erupts in fury as he watches his prize slip away. Without a second's hesitation, he orders Hexax to hunt Philip down. She'd been playing around with some other targets, but now she's being told it's time to get to work for real. A wicked grin spreads across Hexax's face as she tells her zombie dogs, it's feeding time. Seeing as how they're already starving, they don't need much encouragement. Moments later, the hounds are unleashed, and our protagonist suddenly finds himself staring them right in the face. He thinks to himself, of course they'd use zombie dogs. He's well aware that Hexax uses them to wear down her enemy's stamina, letting the dogs slowly chew them up piece by piece. Jae-woo considers it a truly disgusting tactic, but he's already familiar with Hexax's fighting style. Since he's only facing a few of the dogs, he quickly deduces that the main pack must have gone after Philip. Our hero couldn't give a damn about the noble's safety. His one and only concern is for Valpergus. So in order to back her up, he immediately bolts in her direction. Meanwhile, not too far away, Philip and Valpergus are on the run from the pursuing hounds. Philip starts complaining that his mana control is completely shot, blaming the enemy for messing with him. He figures only the demon lord himself could pull off a stunt of this magnitude. In the middle of their escape, a dog lunges for Philip, but Valpergus manages to cut the creature off just in the nick of time. Once again, her incredible speed proves to be the key against their foes. Worried about His Majesty, her top priority is to guarantee he's safe. She warns him, we're deep in demon territory now, so we have to be extremely careful. Out of nowhere, one of Philip's men gets hit. The man immediately cries out to His Majesty for help, but Philip just stands there and does absolutely nothing. Valpergus tries to step in, but Philip sharply cuts her off, ordering her to forget the man and just keep moving. Furious, Valpergus fires back that she's no different from any of them. Her life isn't any more valuable than theirs. She goes on arguing that a noble's duty is to protect their people, not leave them for dead. She can't help but think that if Philip had just listened to Valor, none of this would have happened. She even starts blaming herself for being powerless to help. In the middle of her turmoil, Valpergus is suddenly snatched up by the enemy. Hexax lets out a smirk, commenting on how ridiculously unpredictable humans are. The Countess screams, begging His Majesty to save her. But when Philip sees his own ally captured, he decides to bolt instead of even trying to help. He ditches Valpergus as if she was just some stranger, meaning absolutely nothing to him. Gasping in shock, Valpergus finally realizes she's been completely played. A coward like Philip is completely unworthy of the title of Elector. Meanwhile, Hexax continues her assault, a twisted smile on her face as she watches her victim suffer. All of a sudden, the crack of a gunshot echoes nearby. One of her demonic hounds had just been taken down. Taking advantage of her split-second distraction, our hero rushes in, landing a solid punch right on Hexax's jaw. Valpergus is completely floored to see the mercenary Valor showing up to rescue her. She never in a million years expected to see him here. Overjoyed, she calls out to him her hero. And just like that, the ordeal becomes too much and she faints, collapsing to the ground. Our hero carefully moves Valpergus to a safer location on the sidelines. He knows the only way to get her out of here is to take down this demonic servant first. Hexax, on the other hand, is processing how this guy just killed one of her hounds and snuck up on her without making a sound. She quickly realizes this guy is no ordinary warrior. Jae-woo then looks Hexax dead in the eye and says, "You haven't changed a bit." A confused Hex asks him, "And just who are you supposed to be?" He just replies that a wicked face like hers is impossible to forget. Hexax glances at his weapon and remarks, "Nice piece you got there. Looks like it has some decent range too. But you'd better aim true or my whip will find you." Without a moment's hesitation, the protagonist took his shot. However, the bullet only managed to tear through the enemy's cape. Hexax immediately lashed out, snagging the protagonist by the neck with her whip. With him completely immobilized, she yanked him in close and delivered a brutal headbutt. The impact was so intense that it sent him flying backward. Thrilled, Hexax declared, "This isn't over yet." But when she tried to strike him again, her whip hit nothing but air. After dodging the attack, the protagonist tried to create some distance to counter, but his opponent immediately figured out his strategy. She frantically tried to stop him from getting a clear shot, but somehow every single one of her whip strikes missed. She couldn't wrap her head around how it was even possible. No one in her entire life had ever accomplished such a feat. She prided herself on being the absolute best with a whip, considering it impossible for anyone to evade her attacks until this very moment. Jae-woo prepared to fire again, but Hexax swore she wouldn't give him the chance. And yet again, her opponent completely caught her by surprise. Instead of shooting, he closed the gap in an instant and drove a dagger deep into her. After landing the blow, Jae-woo sarcastically asked, "How do you like my dagger, Hexax?" It was then Hexax realized her obsession with his gun had just cost her an eye. Needing to make a quick escape, she unfurled her massive demonic wings. "I'd absolutely love to stay and fight," she announced. "But I'm afraid we'll have to postpone this little dance for another time." Jae-woo seized the opportunity to mock her. "Already running away. Are you afraid you're going to lose?" Hexax scoffed. "I'm not about to fall for your childish provocations. Close quarters combat isn't my strong suit, and I'm smart enough to know it." But the protagonist pointed out, "I've got a long-range weapon too. I can still attack you from a distance." The demon's servant smugly boasted that she could dodge mere bullets with ease. But when she tried to focus, she realized her depth perception was completely shot. After all, she was down one eye. So when Jae-woo fired his shot, he hit her dead on. To take down a bat, he noted to himself, "The most efficient way is a direct hit." He let out a smirk as he watched her get struck. "Hexax, you're finally getting a taste of your own medicine. Now I wonder what kind of loot you're gonna drop when I finish you off." In a last-ditch effort, Hexax tried to use her charms to avoid being killed. But she seriously underestimated how cold-hearted our protagonist was. Her attempt to sweet-talk him was a complete and utter failure. The protagonist scored some great items from the victory and was pretty satisfied. However, he knew he had to move fast before things got any worse. He grabbed a healing potion and rushed to his friend, knowing it was the only thing that could save her in her critical condition. The protagonist carefully reads the potion's instructions before he does anything. He realizes it has to be applied directly to the wounded spot. But to manage that, he would have to remove Valpergus's armor first. He tries to clear his head, reminding himself that he's only doing this to help her, nothing more. He focuses all his concentration, determined not to mess this up. In that very moment, Jae-woo was hit with a vivid memory from his past. His father died from an illness when he was a boy, and his mother later collapsed from being overworked. Because of this, Jae-woo was already living on his own by the time he was 18. At 22, he found work as a debt collector in Hanam-dong. Although he tried to act like a tough guy, he often cut the debtors some slack. Then one day, he met a client who made his living by playing video games. This client swore that by clearing one major mission, he'd earn enough to wipe out his debt. Curious, Jae-woo asked for more details about the game. The young man told him all about the incredible universe inside the game, even mentioning the gorgeous characters who were better than any real-life women. He explained that at its core, it was just like any other RPG. But it was different because it had thousands of players globally and actually paid its top players for completing difficult missions. Jae-woo couldn't wrap his head around making real money just by playing video games, so his friend dared him to give it a shot. Jae-woo initially claimed he was swamped, but a text about a canceled appointment suddenly opened up his entire day. Wasting no time, he jacked into the game for the very first time. After using the virtual reality capsule, he was completely blown away by how lifelike the technology was. The people on the street looked so real that he started to wonder if he was even in a game anymore. His eyes landed on a street vendor, and the man looked shockingly authentic. He reached out to touch the NPC's face to test how real it was, but the vendor snapped at him, saying he only served customers with money for his fruit. Right then, Jae-woo saw the system interface for the first time, which showed he had 10 florins to his name. He was about to move on when he noticed a little boy who was staring at an apple. His mother, however, was flat broke. Jae-woo asked the vendor how much the fruit cost, and he was told it was 1 florin. He bought the apple and handed it over to the boy. The child's mother thanked him, telling him he really didn't need to spend his money on her son. This small interaction made the protagonist realize that a single florin was worth about a full day's meal. He said goodbye to the boy and his mother, and the moment triggered a memory from his own childhood. He remembered walking around with his mom, always staring at the roasted chickens sold near their house. Little by little, Jae-woo became completely captivated by the game, and after that day, he was officially hooked. Whenever real life got too tough, he used the game as his personal therapy. He began spending more and more time in the game, letting his real life fade into the background. In that world, he could unleash all the pent-up stress from his job on the enemies he fought. Meanwhile, in the real world, his life was just a cycle of waking up and going to work. In the game, however, he had found a whole new way to live. He ended up spending the next 5 years playing. At one point, Jae-woo was approached in-game, where he met Duchess Valpergus for the first time. She told him she'd heard rumors of his skills and invited him to go hunt wild boars. He mentioned he was actually looking for some meat anyway, so her timing was perfect. It took our protagonist no time at all to take down the boar. While Valpergus admired his skill, he couldn't believe she hadn't lifted a finger to help. Valpergus just said he was so powerful that she didn't even need to do anything, then she invited him to team up with her. Jae-woo was suspicious, asking if this was some kind of contract where he'd be stuck working for her all day. Valpergus shot back with a no, then questioned him, "Don't you trust me?" Our hero admitted he doesn't really trust people in general, a response she found surprisingly funny. That's when she made up her mind to recommend him for a position as one of the Empire's knights. And it wasn't long before that recommendation turned into a reality. Even though she knew he had potential, Valpergus was still blown away by how far he'd come in such a short time. I mean, the guy became the Elector of Steel after all. Han Jae-woo insisted he didn't get there on his own, admitting that if he'd never met her, he wouldn't have accomplished anything close to this. But Valpergus countered that it was he who saved all those people, and peace followed because of his actions. Through his deeds, he won the people's loyalty, and more importantly, he also secured the loyalty of Valpergus herself. Valpergus had always held a deep admiration for the Elector of Steel. Flashing forward to the present, Valpergus's feelings about our hero haven't changed one bit. Even with things being so different now, she still feels a special connection to him. She remarks that for someone so young, she's never witnessed such unwavering dedication. So she finally asks him, "What is it that drives you?" He replies that he just loves this world and everything in it, joking that the only exception is his currently battered face. Valpergus seems to get it, but she still argues that he had no business removing her armor. He shot back that he had no choice if he was going to help her. Switching gears, Valpergus insists they need to head to her convent right away so the others know they're both still alive. She promises that once they get back, she'll find a way to repay his kindness. After all, he did save her life, and she feels like she owes him a debt that can't be paid with just words. Even with his face all bruised, Han Jae-woo secretly can't wait to see how she plans on doing that. Valpergus innocently mentions that the convent will likely reward his valor too, but he makes it clear that her reward is the only one he's interested in. A short while later, the two of them finally arrive at Valpergus's convent. Valpergus introduces her companion to Angela, but the nun immediately shuts them down, stating that the convent is in isolation and cannot allow his presence. Because of this, Valorstead Valor is denied entry. We then find Han Jae-woo in a tavern near Rheinfelden, lost in thought over everything that just happened. He was mulling over asking the Valpergus convent for the Angel's Heart, a legendary artifact passed down for hundreds of years and revered as an S-rank holy item. Said to be blessed by the goddess herself, it held the unbelievable power to bring a soul back to its owner. Basically, whoever possessed this item was granted a second chance at life. And Han Jae-woo wanted it badly. An item like that would be a game changer for his journey. While he was lost in these thoughts, Valpergus suddenly materialized right there in his room. She apologized for barging in unannounced, but was clearly taken aback to find him hanging upside down from the ceiling. Han Jae-woo just casually explained that it helped him clear his head and think better. Valpergus then revealed she had something top secret to tell him, but first she made him promise to keep his lips sealed. Once she was confident he could be trusted, she began to explain the situation. Valpergus dropped a bombshell, confessing that the High Abyss was in complete ruins. This completely threw Han Jae-woo for a loop since he'd just been talking with Angela, but Valpergus clarified that the current time's High Abyss was actually Margareta. She also added that she suspected a traitor was in their midst, and that this was probably a scheme orchestrated by Pezamut. But the news that truly floored Han Jae-woo was the revelation that Margareta was still alive, a possibility that hadn't even crossed his mind. See, Margareta was a legendary figure in the fight to protect humanity, powerful enough to take down even a low-ranked demon king on her own. To put it simply, she was the embodiment of strength. On top of that, she was the one who had turned the Valpergus convent into the formidable military force it was today. Hearing this, Han Jae-woo immediately shot to his feet, insisting that he had to go rescue her. Completely startled by his sudden reaction, Valpergus asked him what was wrong. Han Jae-woo was adamant that they had to find the High Abyss, and Valpergus, claiming to know the darkness better than anyone, agreed to join him on the mission. A little while later, over in the convent's office, Angela was listening to Valpergus lay out her plan. Valpergus vouched for Han Jae-woo, practically begging Angela to put her faith in him this one time. Angela, however, was clearly not having any of it. Han Jae-woo quickly put it together that Valpergus must have told Angela everything about him, which explained her standoffish attitude. Then out of nowhere, Angela strode right up to them, making both of them jump. She flat out declared they had a traitor in their ranks, which made trusting a complete stranger a really bad idea. She then insisted that this outsider had no business being there, and ordered Valpergus to escort him out immediately. Han Jae-woo immediately spoke up to defend himself, explaining that he was only concerned for the High Abyss's safety. But Angela coldly shut him down, telling him it was a matter that was none of his concern. Not one to back down, Han Jae-woo revealed that he had already read the Gospel of the Seven Demons. Angela was completely stunned, unable to process how that was even possible since the book was written by Street Anthony himself. Han Jae-woo explained that the book went into great detail, containing everything about the 7 demons that were sealed and banished from this world, including death, one of the most violent forces of darkness. Angela warned him that just saying those names aloud increased the chances of something terrible happening, which made the whole topic incredibly dangerous to even discuss. Still, Han Jae-woo pleaded with her to trust him, claiming he knew exactly how to push back the darkness. With no other real options on the table, Angela finally agreed, but on one condition. He had to promise to keep absolutely everything under wraps. She made it crystal clear that if he ever let this slip, she'd put him through absolute hell. Shortly after that, our hero was escorted to a clandestine location. An overwhelmingly foul stench immediately assaulted his senses. He recognized the odor from Angela's desk, but this was on a whole other level of awful. Our protagonist had never actually seen Margarita's face, but he'd heard the legendary stories about her leg pressing 1 ton on each side. Valpergus, picking up on his nervousness, tried to offer some words of comfort. Jae-woo then asked his friend if she was planning on building a physique as powerful as the other nuns. She admitted that was the plan, but her uncle's disapproval was forcing her to pull her punches during training. When they finally reached their destination, Angela warned them that the demonic energy inside was so intense it could easily make someone lose their mind. She then ordered the others to wait outside for her. The moment she opened the door, our protagonist was hit with an unbelievably powerful energy pouring out from inside. Valpergus pointed out that she was shielded by the goddess's blessing, but she was still worried about our hero. Jae-woo quickly reassured her that he was doing just fine. His system had already given him protection, so he was confident he could press forward. Angela then declared that they had arrived at the High Abyss's chamber. The second he laid eyes on her, the protagonist was completely and utterly stunned. He never in a million years imagined Margarita would look anything like this. He immediately wondered how someone who looked so delicate could possibly be lifting tons of weight. Angela shot him a stern look and told him he needed to take this seriously. She explained that they had already tried everything they could for Margarita, and as a last resort they were forced to depend on a mercenary. And even though she hated the idea, she admitted that our protagonist was their only hope left. She also gave her word to pay any price he named on the condition that he could save the High Abyss. Jae-woo agreed to take the job, but first he asked the nun to let him go. He then announced that Margarita's condition was extremely critical. Being a saint meant her body was absorbing the darkness at twice the rate of a normal person. The dark veins spreading across her neck were all the proof they needed. But even so, he insisted that there was still a way to save her. In a desperate voice, Angela asked him how they were supposed to do that. Our hero simply told her to take a deep breath and try to stay calm. After a moment of silence, he finally revealed that the process was actually quite simple. Their only move was to use the convinced divine relic on Margarita. Angela confronts him, asking if he's actually referring to the angel's heart. She figures the plan is to transfer the dark curse from the High Abyss into another person to absorb it. However, since divine power and curses are polar opposites, the transfer would instantly kill the High Abyss. And that's exactly why the angel's heart is essential for this to work. Our hero confirms that she's hit the nail on the head. The curse is a death sentence for any cleric, so nobody from the convent could even attempt this method. And that's why he stepped up to the plate, but Angela immediately insists the plan is a no-go. She reminds him the abbess herself said this was her own darkness to carry and no one should have to suffer in her place. Our protagonist then offers to become the new vessel for the curse, but Angela isn't having it. She argues that they're messing with a dark curse of unknown origin and with unpredictable effects. It's completely beyond their understanding. In her mind, there's zero chance anyone could survive it. What's even worse, if he became the new host, he'd be stuck with that thing for the rest of his life. Valpergus chimes in, agreeing with Angela and saying there's no good reason for him to throw his life away for the High Abyss. Jae-woo tells them he appreciates the concern, but he's adamant that this is their best shot. He's read the Gospel of the Seven Demons, so he knows a thing or two about darkness. Since he's not a cleric, he isn't susceptible to it in the same way, and besides, he's just an outsider. He tells Angela to stop worrying about him, and to start worrying about her High Abyss. Angela is finally won over, but grumbles that when the High Abyss wakes up, she's going to get an earful for this. Still, she hands over the angel's heart to our hero. After getting the artifact, Jae-woo considers holding on to it, but then realizes this is the perfect opportunity to make Margarita a solid ally. Valpergus tries one last time to talk him out of it, but Angela tells her to let it go, chalking it up to him being a guy who needs to face a challenge head-on. With no more objections, our hero gets ready to start the ritual. He places his hand on Margarita and begins chanting the words of the ancient rite. Just a few moments later, he starts to feel the curse taking hold of him. It isn't just him either. Even from a distance, Angela and Valpergus can feel a wicked energy filling the room. In an instant, our hero's consciousness is ripped away to a completely different dimension. Taking a look around, he finds himself in an endless void, knowing he has to track down the source of this corruption. From the oppressive darkness, a voice echoes, demanding, "Who dares to disturb me?" Our hero introduces himself as Valorstead Valor and boldly declares he has come to set Margarita free. The voice just scoffs, mocking him for thinking a mere mortal could pull something like that off. It even calls him insane for daring to stand up to a being so far beyond his league. The entity then commands him to get out of its sight, but much to its own shock, it finds itself completely unable to seize the protagonist's soul, leaving it utterly baffled. Firing back, Jae-woo demands the dark entity release Margarita right now and take him as its new vessel instead. But the entity just sneers back, saying it doesn't take orders from some insignificant human. Besides, its entire purpose is to devour souls, not set them free. Jae-woo realizes the enemy's playing dirty, which means it's time for him to do the exact same thing. With that, he drops a bombshell, declaring that he's read the Gospel of the Seven Demons. He even reveals he got the book by trading his own dog to the Death Smasher itself. He then taunts that the Death Smasher is probably out there right now selling cheap copies to every other sage it can find. Jae-woo lays it all out. If this thing keeps stalling, every single one of its dirty little secrets is going public. And just like that, the protagonist's bluff pays off. The entity agrees to the deal, but not without adding a condition of its own. Instantly, a new quest notification pops up in his system window. The objective: kill all the Demon Kings backed by destructive death. But he knows there's no way he can handle that. So he tries to negotiate for a better deal, telling the entity he's just too weak for a task of that magnitude. But instead of renegotiating, the shadowy being decides to just give him a piece of its dark power, just enough to get the job done. Terrified, Jae-woo is convinced this is it, he's about to die. He cries out that this wasn't part of their deal, but the entity coldly reminds him that nothing in this world is free. To wield great power, one must always pay an equally great price. The protagonist is racked with unimaginable pain during the process, and even though he gets a massive power-up, it kills him. But then sometime later, he jolts awake in a bed back at the convent, stunned to realize he's still alive. His mind immediately flashes to the artifact he was using. It gave him a second chance at life. Overjoyed, the protagonist starts celebrating. With these new abilities, he's going to become the king of necromancy, capable of commanding entire legions of the undead. And what's more, he's the only player in the entire game who has powers like these. It doesn't take long at all for him to shoot straight to the #1 spot on the game's leaderboards. He's sure that this is how he'll finally get the recognition he's always deserved. But right in the middle of his celebration, Valpergus shows up at his bedside in tears. She tells him she thought she heard his voice and is completely shocked to find him awake. Valpergus goes on to explain that he passed out right after the ritual, so she carried him here to her own room to recover. Now that he's back on his feet, Valpergus warns him to never pull a stunt like that again. She admits she was worried sick, so he takes her hand and apologizes for putting her through that. He also swears it'll never happen again. Hearing this, his friend accepts his apology. Just then, they both sense a disturbance happening outside. A worried Jae-woo rushes in, asking what's going on. Angela sees that he's finally awake, but points out that he wasn't the only one who just woke up. It then dawns on him who's responsible for all the chaos. Margarita announces that she's been asleep for way too long and needs to stretch her legs a little. She adds that she's thrilled to finally meet the person who rescued her. She then formally introduces herself as Margarita, the High Abbess of the Valperga convent. She says that while her name is Margarita, he can just call her Mari. With the introductions out of the way, they all head down into a basement. Jae-woo guessed that Philip had probably escaped the dense forest by now. Now that he'd finally reached the highest necromancer level, cold-blood Jae-woo had been planning to take Philip out on the quiet. However, without the angel's heart, his odds of succeeding against a guardian like Philip were slim. He realized he couldn't let his guard down for a second, even as Margarita was practically buzzing with excitement for a new adventure. Seeing her over-the-top enthusiasm, Angela told Margarita to act with a little more dignity. But the High Abbess just retorted that Angela was only being cranky because of her old age. Even Jae-woo thought Margarita's dramatic behavior was a bit odd, but Valpergus assured him that's just how she is. Jae-woo mused that for someone who was the convent's youngest and strongest fighter, he'd expected Margarita to act more composed. Spotting the two of them talking, Margarita jumped in, exclaiming, "You two seem pretty close." She then explained that the door led to Valperga's underground armory, which was stocked with all kinds of gear. She also mentioned that a lot of the items weren't just for fighting, they were enchanted. She figured a mercenary like him could definitely put them to good use. Jae-woo thanked her for the offer, but Margarita immediately shot back. "You can pay me back by taking me on a date." Angela was livid at the suggestion, though Margarita insisted there was nothing wrong with asking. Whatever Margarita said, swinging the door open. With the right equipment, Jae-woo thought to himself Philip wouldn't even stand a chance. A short while later, Jae-woo made his way to the stables to see his horse. Now that he was fully geared up, he was itching for a showdown with Philip. But just as he was about to head out, Valpergus suddenly appeared. "Were you seriously planning on leaving without so much as a goodbye?" she asked, inviting him to join her for one final ride together. As they rode, Valpergus confessed that even though they'd only just met, it felt like she had known him for an eternity. She recounted everything he'd done fighting by her side against the orcs, saving her life from Hexax's ambush, and of course rescuing the High Abyss. For all of these reasons, she told him she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. After a brief pause, she asked him, "Is there anything you're curious about?" Jae-woo played dumb, asking, "What are you talking about?" but Valpergus just scoffed, telling him not to play coy. "I know you're wondering what I look like underneath this helmet." Jae-woo admitted that since she was never without her helmet, he figured there was a serious reason for it and thought it would be rude to ask. Valpergus then revealed that hidden beneath her helmet was a large scar, the mark of a powerful curse. She explained that even she didn't know the exact nature of the curse, only that her uncle had spent her entire life warning her to hide the mark so no one would ever find out. But despite all that, she sighed, "Some people still call me the ugly knight, completely unaware of the story behind my helmet." She then declared that while she never shows her face to anyone, she was going to make an exception just for him. Valpergus was clearly nervous. This was something she never ever did. But in that moment, as she slowly removed her helmet, Han Jae-woo finally saw her true face for the very first time. "So, what do you think?" Valpergus asked, her voice a little shy now that her face was finally revealed. "Say something," she urged, as Han Jae-woo stood there completely speechless. He snapped out of it and apologized quickly, blurting out, You're incredibly beautiful." His mind raced back to how not even the Countess had ever revealed her face, which explained why he was so utterly shocked. Valpergus then told him she had something else to give him. She presented him with the Byron family treasure, an heirloom passed down to her from her uncle. "Why are you giving me something this valuable?" Han Jae-woo asked, and Valpergus explained, "Think of it as a token. As long as you hold on to this, a part of me will always be with you." Han Jae-woo was deeply touched by her incredible gift. He realized that Valpergus wanted to give him something to always remember her by. "I'll treasure this forever," he promised her. "You can count on it," his friend replied with a warm smile. With their agreement settled, Han Jae-woo announced it was time for him to head out. He gestured for his friend to leave first, saying, "You can head out ahead of me if you'd like." But Valpergus politely refused, insisting that Han Jae-woo should be the one to go first. After a moment of friendly back and forth, they finally parted ways for real. A little while later, Han Jae-woo found himself mulling over all the recent events. He even considered that pursuing a romantic path with Valpergus might not be a bad idea at all. However, his daydreaming was abruptly cut short. A foul stench hit his nostrils, and he looked down to see he was surrounded by the bodies of fallen soldiers. Taking in the gruesome scene, he concluded that this must have been where Philip and Pezamut had their battle. This confirmed it for Han Jae-woo. He was definitely heading in the right direction. He cast a wide-ranging detection spell, and what he uncovered was extremely intriguing. Channeling his power, he unleashed his necromancer ability, and the corpses of the dead soldiers rose to become his new loyal minions. "Your first task," Han Jae-woo commanded his new undead army, "is to scour this area for any sign of Philip." His attention then turned to one of the female corpses he had reanimated. "And as for you," he declared, "I have a special job just for you. Gather every single military uniform you can find scattered around here. I have a very specific use for them," he added with a cunning look. Meanwhile, in a town just a short distance from the battlefield, Philip was holed up with a few of his remaining soldiers. He was still seething over his uncle's betrayal, his mind consumed with thoughts of revenge. The prince began scarfing down some food, completely ignoring one of his men, who reminded him that those were emergency rations. But the prince couldn't care less. His selfish nature meant his own survival was all that mattered. Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows, claiming to have been searching for the prince. The newcomer introduced himself as the mercenary Valor. "Surely you remember me, don't you, prince?" he asked with a knowing look. Philip's face lit up with recognition, even as his own soldier tried to warn him that they were in a precarious situation. Furious at the interruption, the prince viciously struck the soldier who dared to speak up. He smugly declared that this mercenary was obviously here to save him, reminding everyone that he had hired the man personally. "Useless grunts like you are nothing compared to Valorstead," Philip sneered at his own men. "And now that I have a legendary war hero on my side, the rest of you are completely disposable. You're dismissed." Philip then rushed over to the protagonist, practically begging him for a way out. Han Jae-woo told him he was glad he'd finally found him, saying he'd searched the whole forest for his highness. Philip was so overjoyed he started to cry, promising to reward the mercenary handsomely the moment they returned. But Han Jae-woo simply replied, "That's not going to be necessary." In the very next moment, his undead servants launched an attack on Philip's soldiers. Philip couldn't process what was happening or why. "I'm not here for a reward," the protagonist declared, his voice sending a chill down the spine. "I'm here to settle the score with you, prince." Philip was completely blindsided by the turn of events. He scoffs that a mere cub doesn't know its place before a tiger realizing he'd been raising a mongrel all along. Not only does the protagonist accept the insult, but he even mimics a dog blatantly making fun of the prince. Enraged, Philip whips out his moonlit blade and unleashes his fury on some of the undead. Han Jae-woo had figured the prince wouldn't go down that easily, but he's well aware that the more allies Philip summons, the faster his mana will drain. With that in mind, he orders his undead forces to pull back. Philip gloats that taking care of those minions was hardly a challenge. However, the protagonist promises him that this fight is going to be on a completely different level. He even adds that he has something special in store just for the prince. Without another word, the two of them clash in a furious battle. The prince's eyes blaze with pure fury, consumed by the sting of betrayal. On the other hand, the protagonist is facing an enemy he has been meticulously preparing for. Han Jae-woo thinks to himself that this is the electoral sword style. It's a painful moment having to face the very sword style he himself once wielded and admired. While it may look elegant and beautiful, its classic style conceals a deadly counterattack, always lying in wait. "Only the one who holds the title of Steel Elector has the right to use this sword style," Philip demands. "Do you honestly think you can stab me in the back and get away with it?" Han Jae-woo calmly replies that actually he gets along quite well with the nuns. The prince is taken aback that a mere mercenary would have such powerful friends. But he quickly recovers, insisting that he's not the least bit afraid of some militant holy order like the nuns. Philip lunges at the protagonist again, but Han Jae-woo defends himself effortlessly, which only infuriates the prince even more. On top of that, he's feeling every single one of the internal injuries he took from his last throwdown with the vampire demon. Han Jae-woo, completely unimpressed, tells Philip, "Your little melodrama is over." Without a moment's hesitation, the protagonist slams a devastating kick into his opponent. The impact is so brutal it sends the prince flying, coughing up a mouthful of blood. Han Jae-woo declares that he's the one Philip should be afraid of, not some nuns. The prince sputters that he's only losing because his body is still messed up from their last fight. He even tries to remind Han Jae-woo that he was the one who first recognized his talent and gave him a reward. So he whines, "Why are you trying to off me now?" Han Jae-woo just scoffs, saying the prince is even dumber than he gave him credit for. But since Philip clearly isn't getting it, he decides to spell it out for him. First off, he completely blew off Han Jae-woo's warning about being betrayed by someone in his inner circle. Second, he tossed Valpergus aside like trash even after she'd served him so loyally. And third, he selfishly let countless other people die just to save his own skin. For all those reasons, our hero declares that Philip is a disgrace to the title of Elector. Cornered, Philip desperately tries to claim he did it all for his people. "Who's going to feed the rest of my citizens if I die?" he demands. He goes on, insisting that his death would be a golden opportunity for the other electors who would jump at the chance to attack the second they found out he was gone. The protagonist has to admit the prince has a point, so he decides to give him one last chance. He adds that if Philip takes his deal, he'll even give him a healing potion. Desperate to survive, Philip immediately agrees, shouting, "I'll do anything, just let me live." With that, our hero commands Philip, "Get on your knees and beg Valpergus for forgiveness." The prince scrambles to agree, even promising to donate 10,000 florins to the House of Byron. The protagonist then hands him the potion, telling him to drink the whole thing. Philip takes a quick sip from the vial, but then lets the rest of it spill onto the ground. Han Jae-woo asks sarcastically, "What's the matter? Didn't you like the taste?" Then he drops the bomb that wasn't a healing potion. It was dragon poison. The second he realizes he's been played, Philip's face twists in pure rage. Our hero tells him he has Hexax to thank since he swiped the poison directly from her private stash. In a last-ditch effort, Philip lunges at the protagonist, but he's cut down before he can even land a single hit. And the one who struck the final blow wasn't our hero, it was one of Philip's own former allies. Philip instantly recognizes Piffenheim, but the sight leaves him completely floored. The last time he saw her, she was being torn to shreds by a pack of zombie dogs. Piffenheim explains that after being left for dead, her new master saved her and gave her a second chance at life. She makes it crystal clear that now absolutely nothing ties her to the prince. In fact, she admits she always despised his arrogance, and now it's time for Philip to pay for every single one of his crimes. Right before Philip bites the dust, the system flashes a warning. Taking out the Iron Elector could seriously mess with the game's main storyline. Han Jae-woo just can't wrap his head around how a scumbag like that could be so crucial to the game. Still, he doesn't hesitate for a second, figuring he can deal with the consequences and find a workaround later. So he gives Piffenheim the green light to get her revenge. And just like the warning said, the system immediately starts blasting him with a bunch of error alerts. Even though he knows this will make things way harder down the road, our protagonist doesn't regret a single thing. Meanwhile, from high above, Aquila is watching the whole chaotic scene unfold. She notes to herself that the protagonist has in fact just broken one of the fundamental seals. And judging by the look on his face, Han Jae-woo is feeling on top of the world, full of confidence and excitement. Aquila is absolutely loving this and can't wait to see him wreak even more havoc on the game's world. After all, she declares this is just getting started. Han Jae-woo thinks to himself that just as you'd expect from taking down an Elector, the rewards for defeating Philip are off the charts. On top of that, he scored 2 exclusive S-class abilities as a reward for leveling up. But when it came to actual item drops, he only got a single object. At first glance, it just looked like a regular old magic amulet. However, when he tried to get a closer look and analyze it, the item threw up a protective barrier. Seeing that, Han Jae-woo figured his best bet was to take the item to Margareta and have her unlock it for him. Right after that, his system pinged him with a notification about a new target, a transcendent being. That meant one thing: he'd have to be extremely careful when he went to hunt this thing down. Becoming a transcendent being was Han Jae-woo's own ultimate goal after all. To get there, he had to take down powerful opponents, using each victory as a stepping stone toward his final goal. Just then, Piffenheim showed up, telling her master she had something important for him. It turns out she'd been checking the area where Philip's men were and managed to find another item. Han Jae-woo figured this had to be the main reward from the mission. Struck by its otherworldly glow, he immediately asked her about it. "And what about that other matter? Has it been dealt with?" Just as you commanded, Piffenheim outfitted Philip's men in the gear of the Pezamut faction, perfectly disguising them as demons. Amidst the aftermath, one man was on his knees, pleading for his life and vowing to do anything to survive. Han Jae-woo didn't recognize the man, not until Piffenheim informed him that this was one of Philip's last surviving allies. "So, master, what are your orders for this one?" she asked. Seeing Philip's soldier weeping uncontrollably, Han Jae-woo declared, "I believe I'll send a little gift to Pezamut. I do hope he likes it." A short while after Han Jae-woo's departure, Lawrence, a captain of an army fleet, was surveying the area. It wasn't long before he came across several bodies scattered on the ground. One of his subordinates confirmed, "Sir, these are Pezamut soldiers." They also reported having found a single survivor from Philip's unit. Lawrence interrogated the survivor, who revealed that both the prince and his precious item had been captured. The survivor claimed they were forced to scatter after a Pezamut ambush, only to get cornered while trying to flee. But Lawrence's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Are you telling me you're the sole survivor of an attack that wiped out every single one of your comrades?" Startled, the survivor stammered out a yes and desperately tried to explain himself. However, Lawrence simply sighed, lamenting that he hadn't arrived in time to find Philip. He told the survivor that he had risked his own life to protect his superiors upholding the Sacred Knight's code. With a powerful voice, Lawrence then turned to address his entire troop. This man, he proclaimed, honored his commander until the very end. Even when facing certain death, he maintained an unbreakable knightly spirit. He is a shining example for all of us. Now we ride to rescue Prince Philip. Sometime later at the Palace of Roses, Lawrence presented himself, giving a report on his search for Philip. He admitted that he had only uncovered a few scant clues and no definite sign of the prince's whereabouts. His superior correctly deduced that he hadn't recovered the item either. After all, Philip would never abandon something so crucial. Lawrence was quick to place the blame on Pezamut, to which Roland commented, "That name is starting to get on my nerves." The captain offered his apologies, but Rose interjected that finding the item was their absolute top priority. She added that the item was the only thing capable of restoring Prince Philip to his status as an elector. Roland then stated Philip is not the kind of man who would go down so easily. She then commanded her servant to send a message to Pezamut, demanding the item's immediate return. Meanwhile, she just grinned, knowing the real fun was about to begin. Over at Pezamut's base of operations, an urgent message arrived. The moment he read it, sheer terror washed over him. The madwoman had returned. The woman causing him such dread was, of course, Margarita. She was the one person who could strike fear into the heart of a demon like Pezamut. After all, he was the very one responsible for the curse that had put her in a coma. His servant tried to argue she was just a human, but Pezamut immediately shot that idea down. Margarita stormed off's hideout all by herself. He snarled and brutally dismantled every last one of his men. But the most unbelievable part was that she did it all because one of Off's goons stepped on her snack. After that day, Margarita became known among the demons as the Destructive Storm. Just then, another of Pezamut's servants rushed in, announcing, "A message just arrived from Queen Roland." "This is the absolute worst time for this," Pezamut grumbled. He already had way too much on his plate to deal with. But as he scanned the letter, he was completely baffled by what Roland was talking about. He had no clue what item she was referring to, and the confusion sent Pezamut into a rage. Now he had some psycho on his tail, demanding something he was pretty sure didn't even exist. Pezamut's servant tried to figure out why Roland would even assume they had the item. He reasoned that not only had they not taken anything, they'd actually lost the hex axe while chasing Philip. "This whole situation feels suspicious," the servant mused to himself. Margarita's return, the sudden disappearance of this item, all these events were connected, but the cause behind them was a total mystery. That's when the servant began to suspect there might be a mastermind pulling all the strings from behind the scenes. And in a way, he wasn't far from the truth. He just hadn't yet discovered that Han Jae-woo was the one behind this entire elaborate scheme. And speaking of the devil, Han Jae-woo suddenly sneezed, prompting his ally to ask, "Are you coming down with a cold?" "No," he replied. "I just caught a weird smell in the air." As they continued on their way, Piffenheim couldn't help but ask what her master planned to do with Philip's body. Han Jae-woo admitted he hadn't decided yet, as his mind was focused on something far more important. After all, he was now in possession of the legendary Golden Imperial document. With that document and Philip's body in his grasp, he believed his potential was virtually limitless. He declared with absolute confidence, "Now the world is mine to control." Piffenheim was overjoyed for her master, wishing him a long and successful life ahead. A little while later, a group of merchants were on their way home. They were even planning to hit the first tavern they came across and drink until they couldn't stand. They were all set to celebrate, but their plans were cut brutally short when an arrow suddenly flew out and struck one of the men. His friend could only watch in horror as his buddy collapsed, completely helpless to do anything. It turned out a group of bandits had ambushed their carriage, swarming out from the nearby forest. However, the ambushed merchants refused to be easy prey. They were determined to get revenge for their fallen comrade, and a chaotic battle instantly erupted. The bandit leader sneered, accusing the merchants of making a killing by reselling their goods to Roland. The merchant shot back that the bandit had no clue who he was dealing with, but the outlaw couldn't have cared less. In a swift move, he knocked the weapon from the merchant's hand and backed him into a corner. He then started taunting the merchant, telling him to go ahead and run to Valpergus for help and to bring her uncle along if he felt lucky. Meanwhile, speaking of Valpergus, she was sharing a quiet moment alone with our protagonist Han Jae-woo. Noticing a little smudge on his face, she leaned in close to gently wipe it off. But just then, the door flew open, and Margarita burst in, desperately searching for him. Her sudden entrance made them both jump, but Margarita herself was the one who seemed the most shocked. It was the very first time she had ever seen Valpergus's face without her helmet on. She admitted that a face that beautiful was enough to make her own heart skip a beat. The High Abyss then gave Jae-woo a stern warning to treat Valpergus right, telling him he'd better not screw things up with a girl like that. If he did, she threatened to personally rip him in half. Switching gears, Margarita then demanded to hear the details about Philip's death. Jae-woo explained that after he defeated the prince, he left the body with one of his subordinates. Margarita, however, insisted that Philip being dead was the entire problem. She was furious because she wanted to be the one to finish him off herself. Seeing the sheer rage on the Abyss's face, Jae-woo thought to himself that it was a good thing. Philip died before ever having to meet her. Trying to calm Margarita down, Jae-woo quickly told her that he had a little something for her. He then pulled out a pouch heavy with money, explaining that it used to be the prince's, but now it belonged to her. He added that with this much cash, she could buy every last bit of food her heart desired. Margarita's mood instantly flipped, calling Jae-woo a true saint of compassion and declaring that she was now even more smitten with him. Meanwhile, Valpergus spotted a stack of papers and, curious, asked what they were. As she scanned the documents, she realized they were letters to Philip outlining Roland's plans to install him as the next emperor. Jae-woo explained that the current emperor and Roland were on bad terms, all because of issues with money. Margarita added that economic blockades were also being used as a weapon. She clarified that the emperor was actively seizing goods from every merchant guild connected to Roland. This move was driving the nearby cavalry units absolutely crazy. This was the very reason House Ritter launched an attack on the Ignis Merchant Guild. Margarita revealed that due to all this, Valpergus was under an incredible amount of mental stress. Valpergus, however, had been trying to keep Jae-woo completely in the dark about the situation, but Jae-woo pressed her for answers, asking what was really going on. Left with no other option, his friend finally agreed to tell him the whole story. A short time later, Jae-woo began to grasp just how tangled this entire mess had become. He'd never imagined that the Emperor's economic blockade would snowball into a massive showdown with the Elector of Byron. While he was lost in thought, Valpergus came by for a visit. She told him she really wished he would just forget everything he had learned earlier. She explained that she didn't want to get him mixed up in her family's troubles. Jae-woo, however, flatly stated that he couldn't just ignore it. He made it clear he wanted to help Valpergus with anything she needed. Despite his offer, she insisted that the situation was way too big for him to get involved in. She assured him that she would seek help from other allies and that he shouldn't worry about it. Even though he knew Valpergus was dependable, Jae-woo felt she was still too inexperienced and far too soft-hearted for this. So he tried his best to put his friend at ease. He told her he understood that this whole mess was too big for a mere mercenary to handle. But even with that said, he absolutely refused to just stand by and watch. He was determined to help her no matter what it took. After all, he argued mercenaries could be useful in their own special way. His friend's face lit up, appreciating his ability to make a joke even in such a tense situation. In any case, Jae-woo announced that he was feeling pretty confident. Valpergus, on the other hand, didn't fully grasp what he was talking about. The following morning, Jae-woo found himself waking up unusually early. He made a beeline for the convent, heading directly to Margarita's quarters. He barged right in, catching her mid-meal and causing Margarita to nearly choke on her food. Jae-woo wasn't about to waste any more time. He explained that he had a magical item he'd snagged from Philip, but he couldn't figure out how to open it. Piquing the High Abbess's curiosity, he promised her a reward if she could open it for him right then and there. Without even hesitating, Margarita instantly agreed to give it a shot. A few moments later, our hero spots a pair of gloves and asks Margarita what their deal is. Margarita explains that they're basically an upgraded version of the magic container she just unlocked. Now she can summon items whenever she wants with just a simple flick of her palm. As he walks away, Jae-woo admits to himself he's never seen anything like it, wondering if the game had some kind of secret update. He figures it's not a bad thing at all, in fact it's quite the opposite. But that train of thought gets derailed when he stops for a drink of water. He asks his horse, totally confused, "Hey, why'd you stop all of a sudden?" That's when our protagonist realizes he's arrived in the city of Pezamut right in the middle of a massive festival. After shoving his way through the massive crowd, Jae-woo finally lets out a sigh of relief. He feels like he just spent 3 hours navigating a theme park on a holiday weekend, but he's finally broken free from the overwhelming mob. Then, cutting through all the chaos, his eyes land on someone holding a welcome sign. Our hero thinks to himself that this place is exactly how he remembers it. He can see a crowd of people eagerly waiting for the arrival of someone they're calling the Great One. Jae-woo recalls that Pezamut is a city where tons of different races live together, and the Great One they're all waiting for is none other than the Demon King Cobalt. Cobalt was instrumental in bringing different cultures together, all thanks to his incredible knowledge and persuasive charm. He's known as the most pro-human Demon King right after Roland, and he's also a key player who can help them with their current predicament. That's why Jae-woo is dead set on finding him no matter what it takes. While he's lost in thought, someone comes up to our protagonist declaring that he has the aura of a legendary adventurer. Even without knowing you, I can feel your power from a mile away, the stranger proclaims. Jae-woo decides to pull up his system window to see what this goblin is going on about. That's when he notices his SS-rank title worthy of a great leader, which grants him the ability to have a strong influence on complete strangers. Now, understanding the situation, Jae-woo simply states that he wants to meet Cobalt. The goblin, obviously thrilled, exclaims, "How exciting, the city is getting two powerful visitors at the same time." He then adds that he has business with Cobalt too and would be more than happy to lead our hero right to him. Before long, they found themselves standing before Cobalt's castle. The goblin instructs our hero to relax with some tea in the reception hall while he goes to announce his arrival. Meanwhile, the protagonist couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. How could a simple goblin size up his power level at a glance? He decided to shelve the thought for the moment. His eyes landed on a statue of the castle's owner in the center of the room, and a brief, chilling thought crossed his mind. Maybe I'll be the one hunting this guy down before long. Just a few moments later, the goblin reappeared, asking if the adventurer was enjoying the tea. Our hero confirmed he was, but then sternly warned the goblin to make his presence known before sneaking up on him again. Switching gears, Jae-woo then questioned the goblin on how he came to work for Cobalt. The goblin replied that his bond with Cobalt was one of inestimable love. As Jae-woo mulled this over, he remembered that everyone else in the city called Cobalt the Great One, yet this goblin spoke about him so casually. That's when he noticed a ring on the goblin's finger and casually asked, "Are you married?" The goblin let out a chuckle, complimenting the protagonist's sharp eye and boasting that the ring cost him 10 years of his salary. In a stunning turn, Jae-woo addressed the goblin by his real name, Cobalt. He then admitted that it took him far too long to see through the charade. He pointed to the ruby ring, the very one Cobalt was known to cherish, and mentioned how the goblin's overly familiar tone from the start had already raised his suspicions. But the final nail in the coffin, Jae-woo explained, was that the goblin was the only person who didn't call Cobalt the Great One. Caught red-handed, Cobalt had no option but to drop the disguise and reveal his true form. Now, in his original form, Cobalt acknowledged his guest, stating, "I know I'm in the presence of the renowned Valor. He then formally introduced himself, declaring, "I am the law in Plusen City." Cobalt then added that he presumed the protagonist was there to discuss the situation with Valpergus. Jae-woo confirmed as much, saying he was hoping to get some crucial clues or information out of him. The master of the castle admitted his reluctance to help, but proposed that if our hero could meet one condition, he'd share everything he knew. Jae-woo had seen this coming a mile away, so he cut right to the chase, asking what the condition was. Even without hearing the request, the protagonist knew Cobalt's obsession with knowledge was well established from past events. After all, Jae-woo held unique intel on half the future wars and even inside information on real estate speculation. So naturally, he was curious to see what kind of valuable knowledge Cobalt would demand in return. But in a completely unexpected twist, Cobalt's only request was simply to become friends with Valor. Cobalt explained that Valor had recently become the talk of the town, especially after taking down Hexax. On top of that, he'd also gotten pretty close with the Empire's most famous paladin, and rumors were even flying about a potential romance between Valor and Valpergus. For all of these reasons, Cobalt wanted to form a connection with Valor, figuring it could be incredibly useful down the line. In response, the protagonist fires back, "And why should I be your friend?" Cobalt then presents an item to Valor, explaining, "This is a communication ring." He elaborates that through this ring, they'll be able to communicate across vast distances. Our protagonist is still skeptical, thinking it's a terrible idea to get friendly with someone like him. However, Cobalt declares that as a token of their new friendship, he will provide every piece of information Valor needs. To prove his sincerity, he drops a crucial piece of intel, a clue hidden in the capital of the Duchy of Saxon. The capital of the Electorate of Saxon, as it turns out, is the city of Dresden. Acting on Cobalt's tip, our protagonist makes his way to Dresden. When guards try to block his entrance to the city, he simply flashes his system screen, leaving the soldiers completely petrified. With an icy stare, Jae-woo warns them to never stand in his way again. Once inside, he strolls through the streets with his system screen brazenly on display for everyone to see. The moment people lay eyes on it, they drop to their knees in front of him, terrified of being attacked or worse. Jae-woo thinks to himself that achieving his goals has never been this easy. Before long, he arrives at the Merchants Guild. Inside, a woman urgently reports that an unknown individual is approaching the guild, and he seems to be extremely dangerous. But just then, our protagonist steps into the building, startling the woman with his fully displayed system screen. Following this entrance, he finds himself standing face to face with the guild leader. The leader immediately gets to the point, asking, "Why would someone of your stature come here?" Jae-woo dismisses his system window and states, "I'm here to make a deal with the leader of the Merchants Guild." This move was based on what Cobalt had previously told him about Dresden. He'd mentioned that Velia's Merchant Guild and the city's Ritter Knight family were buried in massive debt, trapped in a serious financial entanglement. Our protagonist had absolutely no way of knowing this kind of information on his own. As expected, Cobalt's knowledge was on another level. After all, this was the man who had outplayed the protagonist in information warfare countless times in the past. His intelligence network spanned the entire continent, which is how Cobalt earned the title of King of Shadows. Judging by our hero's expression, Cobalt could tell he was satisfied with the intel, but Cobalt still had more to share. Back in the present, Jae-woo stood before the leader of the Merchant Guild. The guild leader introduced his daughter Marin to the protagonist, explaining that she was now confined to her bed day in and day out. Not long ago, Marin was a perfectly normal child, but one day she suddenly lost all the strength in her arms to the point where she couldn't even lift a fork. Soon enough, her whole body began to shut down. Her father spared no expense, hiring the city's top doctors and even outside specialists, but none of them could find a cure. Watching his daughter in this state, he was heartbroken, missing the days when she was healthy and full of life. But just like any loving father would, he refused to give up hope of saving her. Desperate, he begged the renowned adventurer to do whatever it took to help his daughter. First things first, the protagonist told the guild leader to just call him Valor. He then got straight to the point, explaining that he was there to make a proposition. After assessing Marin's condition, Valor could see just how critical her situation really was. She had lost a significant amount of muscle mass and her body was dangerously malnourished. He came to the conclusion that conventional medicine was completely useless against her illness. But there was good news: he knew of a way to heal her completely. The father, clinging to any shred of hope, immediately asked what needed to be done. Jae-woo replied that he required an elixir found only in Gross Glockner. The father's face fell. He knew that name all too well, explaining that this made saving his daughter practically impossible. That's precisely why he considered retrieving what the protagonist requested to be a suicide mission. You see, Gross Glockner is a massive canyon located deep in the southeastern part of the empire. And while its landscapes are breathtaking, it's infamous for one thing: it's the lair of the terrifying demonic dragon Schwarze Teufel. Very few ancient dragons still exist on the continent, and Schwarze Teufel possesses power beyond measure. His power is so immense that not even the demon kings themselves would dare to challenge him. The entire canyon he calls his domain is swarming with countless vicious beasts and demons. To put it simply, the place is a death trap for humans and demons alike, an impossible challenge for any normal person. But our protagonist was far from an ordinary person. He put the merchant guild leader's fears to rest, declaring that he would retrieve the elixir himself. Valor's words ignited a spark of hope in the desperate father's heart. Still, he couldn't help but worry, convinced that no one could possibly make it back from Gross Glockner alive. Yet Jae-woo added that more than any elixir, what Marin truly needed right now was her father's love. Deeply moved, the girl's father had to ask why Valor was going to such lengths to help him. Jae-woo revealed that he knew about the massive debt the Ritter family owed to the Merchant Guild. In exchange for saving Marin, all he asked was for the guild leader to completely forgive that debt. The guild leader was stunned by the selfless offer, but his daughter's entire future was on the line. The sheer thought of seeing her healthy again made refusing completely out of the question, and so he gave his word to honor the agreement as soon as his daughter was cured. A short while later, our protagonist arrived at the formidable Gross Glockner. He took a moment to remark how much he was enjoying the moonlit view and the crisp mountain air. Glancing down, his eyes immediately caught sight of some rare herbs on the ground. He knew right away that incredibly potent medicines could be made from flowers like these. He quickly turned and instructed his horse not to even think about eating the valuable plants. Gross Glockner was so notoriously treacherous that guards were stationed everywhere to keep people out. But our protagonist, of course, smoothly convinced them to grant him exclusive access. He knew this land was so saturated with dragon mana that nearly everything here had medicinal value. In other words, the very dirt beneath his feet was practically worth its weight in gold. Wasting no time, the protagonist began collecting every potential remedy he could find. Besides curing the guildmaster's daughter, he figured he could sell the rest for a tidy profit. Plus, he could always keep a few of the more potent items for himself to use in battle. But in the middle of his harvest, Jae-woo was suddenly clocked on the head by a rock. From across the way, a goblin approached, ordering him to get off its land. And he wasn't alone. The goblin had an entire army with him, declaring this place didn't belong to humans. Fast forward a bit, and under Jae-woo's watchful eye, those same goblins were now hard at work tilling the fields. But when he spotted a goblin doing it all wrong, our protagonist sharply laid into him. "Dig properly," he commanded. "I don't want the roots of these plants damaged. If you keep up this sloppy work, I'll send every last one of you right back to your graves." Jae-woo, clearly irritated, then asked, "Are we all on the same page here? See, just a little while earlier, before all this, these were the very goblins who had tried to jump him. But he simply used his ability to drain their blood effortlessly, taking them all out in a single move. Even in death, however, the goblins still had their uses. Jae-woo just used his skills again, breathing life back into their corpses and creating an instant army of zombie goblins. This way he wouldn't have to get his own hands dirty cultivating the plants. Back in the present, Jae-woo mused, "You really shouldn't have picked a fight you couldn't win now, should you, Kururak?" His new servant Kururak humbly replied that the goblins had failed to recognize his master's true greatness and thanked him for taking them in. Our protagonist just chuckled, saying he was the one who should be grateful, seeing as the goblins were working so hard. Switching gears, he asked what other creatures called these canyons home besides the goblins. Kurura quickly rattled off a list, explaining that besides goblins, the canyon was crawling with werewolves, worms, giant centipedes, and plenty of ogres. Jae-woo noted how his new servant had it all memorized, thinking it was a smart move to keep him around. Kururak declared that it was his honor to serve. All of a sudden, our protagonist heard a voice crackling from his ring. On the other end, Kubalt asked if he had completely forgotten that the ring was a communication device. Jae-woo admitted, "Yeah, I kinda did. So what's on your mind?" The Demon King inquired about how things were shaping up in Gross Glockner. Jae-woo sarcastically replied that the water was fine, the air was fresh, and the moonlight was lovely. Kubalt mentioned that the city of Pluzon was also buzzing with preparations for an upcoming festival and invited him to swing by if he got the chance. But what I really called to say, Kubalt continued, is that Valpergus recently paid a visit to Ritter. Just as Valor had predicted, they showed up demanding a ridiculous settlement fee. They also threatened to confiscate all the goods intended for trade with Roland. In a nutshell, the whole thing was one-sided and totally unfair. Our protagonist declared that they had officially crossed the line. Kubalt, however, warned him that this was only the beginning. He said he truly wished Valpergus would be more reasonable, but Jae-woo argued there was no way she would ever accept those terms. He urged Kubalt to do whatever it took to buy them some time. Kubalt agreed to do as Valor asked, saying he'd do it for the sake of their friendship. With that, our hero promised to make it up to him for this favor when they next met, which seemed to please the Demon King. After all, Gross Glockner was a real gold mine, so he expected a pretty hefty reward. Then, hearing the noise in the background, he figured Valor had his hands full and said he wouldn't bother him anymore. Jae-woo was relieved that Kubalt had finally ended the call. He was, after all, only putting up with the guy for Valpergus' sake. But just when our hero thought he might finally get a moment's peace, Kururak came running up to him. "We have a problem," he announced with urgency. It was then that Jae-woo noticed the approach of several monsters. A pack of ogres had apparently decided to give him a warm welcome. Seeing this, the protagonist told Kururak to get back. He quickly realized that the goblins under his command had already been wiped out. To make matters worse, a quick analysis of the ogres revealed his blood absorption technique was completely useless against them, and bringing the goblins back was totally off the table. They were simply no match for these brutes. With no other choice, Jae-woo figured it was time to get his own hands dirty. He tapped into his magical power and summoned Rublania, one of the Empire's 12 legendary swords, famously known as the unbreakable treasure of House Pulse. The moment the ogres laid eyes on the blade, their entire attitude changed. Our hero confidently declared, "Of course they recognize my weapon. After all, Rublania is famous for lighting up the darkness." He even scoffed at Philip for being a fool who owned such a treasure without a clue of its true power, but now properly armed, our protagonist launched his assault. After landing a hit on the first ogre, Jae-woo moved in, trying to surround the rest of them. He was so fast that his enemies couldn't even track his movements. He wasn't just attacking from their blind spots, he was straight up toying with his opponents. And before the ogres even had a chance to react, Jae-woo cut them down, leaving them zero opportunity to fight back. After the dust settled, he reflected that before the battle, he wasn't even sure he could pull off this technique. But now, looking at the results, he had to give himself a silent pat on the back. He wasn't the only one impressed. His new servant also thought his performance was absolutely incredible. Our hero simply commented that this was nothing compared to how he was in his prime. But then just a few moments later, something caught him completely off guard. A creature suddenly launched an attack, demanding, "What do you think you're doing?" Jae-woo thought to himself, "Where did that even come from?" But before he could even finish the thought, the creature had him in its clutches. Furious, it snarled, "I'm going to snap your neck." Our protagonist had finally come face to face with an enemy on his own level. And not only that, his opponent immediately tossed him aside like he was nothing. As he took the hit, Jae-woo realized he wasn't up against some random mook. A single blow had already knocked off 10% of his health. His new foe remarked, "You're pretty strong. Who are you?" Jae-woo shot right back, "You should introduce yourself first." With a smirk, she declared, "I am the master of Gross Glockner." Jae-woo's eyes shot wide open. "The demon dragon?" he questioned internally. This was not at all what he had imagined she would look like. While he was picturing a more classic-looking dragon, the enemy closed the distance between them. "There's something different about you," she mused, her eyes narrowing. "Your life force. It's from another dimension, isn't it?" Kururak immediately leaped in front of Jae-woo, shouting, "I will protect my master," but the enemy simply snapped. "I've had more than enough of your arrogance and insolence. I'm going to end you right here and right now." Jae-woo quickly cut in, "Wait, just hear me out first." But his enemy had absolutely no intention of listening to a word he said. So the protagonist made a bold declaration, "If I die, you're coming with me." That audacious claim was enough to make her stop dead in her tracks. "What in the world are you talking about?" she demanded. As she pressed him for an explanation, Jae-woo revealed, "I sometimes have dreams that show the future, and in one of them I saw you." But he wasn't finished. "In my dream," he continued, "the demon dragon suffers a truly gruesome death. The story he was spinning sounded completely unbelievable, but Han Jae-woo challenged her. If you don't believe me, then read my memories and see it for yourself. She reached for his head to scan his memories, her sharp claws accidentally pricking his skin. Taking a beat, she announced, "Fine, I'll give it a try. But make no mistake," she warned, "if you're lying to me, you're dead." After making her threat, she pulled back her claws and focused, preparing to dive into Han Jae-woo's mind. But the instant she plunged into his consciousness, a bizarre sensation completely overwhelmed her. Inside his mind, she was hit with a chaotic storm of things she couldn't possibly begin to comprehend. That's when Han Jae-woo's voice echoed directly in her thoughts. Ignore all that he urged. Focus on what matters. But despite his warning, her curiosity got the better of her, drawing her toward other memories. To stop her from prying too deep, Han Jae-woo immediately forced the specific vision he wanted her to see to the forefront. His adversary felt something was off, but trapped inside his consciousness, she had little choice but to follow his lead. A moment later, she saw a vision of herself in her true, terrifying dragon form. That's when it hit her, the protagonist wasn't lying. A single glance was all the proof she needed. She gasped, pulling herself sharply out of Han Jae-woo's thoughts. Meanwhile, the protagonist thought to himself, "Phew, that was close. She almost saw too much." Still clearly rattled, the demon dragon muttered, Who could possibly be powerful enough to take my life? In any case, she announced, "I'll leave you in peace. You're free to do whatever you want in these mountains." "Hold on," Han Jae-woo interjected. "I want to make a deal with you. But first," he said, "your name is way too long. So from this point forward, I'm calling you Shubi." Her expression made it clear she hated that idea. Han Jae-woo tried to reassure her, saying, "You can survive this," but she rejected the name, huffing, "I am thousands of years old." Unfazed, the protagonist insisted, "Just hear me out." All of a sudden, Han Jae-woo's system alert went off. New mission, gain the dragon's trust. Difficulty high. A short while later, a snake was seen slithering through the forest, only to be casually squashed under a passing foot. He then dramatically announced, "I am the master of the deep dark abyss, the king of chaos and disorder. My name is Odgash, the demon king." Right as he wrapped up his grand entrance, his servant cut in, "My lord, we're almost there." "We can't stop now," but Odgash just scoffed at him. "I am making my grand entrance. I will not tolerate any interruptions." His servant immediately apologized, but Odgash simply waved him away. "Just forget it," he grumbled. "You've already killed the mood." At that very moment, a woman appeared, her voice cutting through the air. "That servant is mine," she declared firmly. "Not the Demon King's." Odgash let out a chuckle. "Ah, Calione, my daughter, you finally made it." He then added, "Just as I promised, once this campaign is a success, I will grant your deepest desire." Even though Calione insisted she didn't need anything, Odgash just smiled. "As your father, it's only natural for me to do so." He then turned to his servants, announcing that Gross Glockner was guarded by the demon dragon. "The beasts under her command are nothing special," he said, "but the demon dragon herself will be a tough opponent. Even so, you have nothing to fear. All you have to do is devour everything in your path and ruthlessly crush every living creature beneath your feet." To cap it off, Odgash bellowed, "With my leadership, your victory is absolutely guaranteed." With his villainous children now thoroughly motivated, he prepared to march toward their objective. Shifting back to our protagonist, he was in the middle of gathering his own servants. He laid it out for them. Despite being bothered by strange creatures and a dragon with serious communication problems, their mission was to collect as many valuable herbs as possible for Dresden. With that settled, he commanded all the goblins to get back to their tasks. Following this pep talk, Kururak served his master a refreshing mandragora beverage. While sipping his drink, the protagonist mused that bumping into a dragon so unexpectedly would have been a lot more dangerous without his memories of previous playthroughs. Even with that advantage, he felt this particular run was shaping up to be quite different from the rest. From Philip's strange new behavior to the dragon showing up, and on the topic of appearances, he couldn't forget Valpergus finally revealing her face to him. His next course of action was to check some details through his system menu. Just as he suspected, our hero realized this wasn't the first instance of things going off script. Every event that had unfolded so far was a departure from the previous run. Therefore, he concluded that the events yet to come might be entirely new as well. Han Jae-woo remembered nearly every map in Gross Glockner down to every last stone, so it made no sense to be confused about where the dragon's lairs were located. Something was definitely not right here. The battle for Har Fahim between the Steel Elector and Pezamut Friedrich's betrayal, the Steel Elector's assistance, the crisis at Valpergus's Grand Convent. The major scenarios were all playing out, but the individual events within them were different. Still, the protagonist couldn't quite put his finger on what had changed. Was he forgetting something critical? His concentration was shattered by a sudden uproar among the goblins. Our hero tried to get a handle on what was happening. One of the goblins piped up, saying he had simply injured himself while collecting herbs. Han Jae-woo warned them to be careful, explaining that certain routes were hazardous, which is precisely why he gave them proper instructions on how to gather the plants. After dealing with that, he attempted to return to his previous line of thinking. But then something clicked. The injured goblin had a brother. He paused to think, which brought to mind Charlotte and her younger sister, a detail he'd only come across in this current run. In that instant, the protagonist had a flash of insight. All the unique events from the current playthrough raced through his mind. He came to a realization once his own position had changed, his entire perspective had changed right along with it. In a past life, he was the legendary Steel Elector, the ruler of an empire, and even the hero who saved the entire world. He possessed the extraordinary power to back up every single one of those titles. But now he's just another mercenary working a simple job. It's a far cry from the legendary figures he used to embody. All that remains from his previous adventures are the memories. On the other hand, our protagonist feels like he's handled things differently this time. He actually forged real connections with people who were once just non-player characters in his story. Just seeing the look on Valpergus' face made it all worth it. In his previous run, Jae-woo would have just paid off Valpergus' debt and kept on moving. He never knew the full story behind the situation until now. Lost in these thoughts, it finally clicks for our hero that everything started changing after he met Aquila. It was at that very moment she gave him the missing piece of the puzzle to unlock the game's true ending. A mysterious new space was brought into existence, and with it, a new role was created just for him. Now things are finally starting to make sense to the protagonist as he figures out Aquila is the one behind all of this. Noticing his master is acting a bit strange, Kururak asks if the drink isn't to his taste. But in that instant, a massive bang echoes from nearby. Shubi suddenly appears yelling that everything the protagonist said was the absolute truth. Jae-woo calmly states that this is all thanks to Aquila. The demon dragon has no clue what he's talking about. But he continues explaining that Aquila has made this whole game way more interesting than it was before. Shubi still insists she didn't understand a single word that came out of his mouth. Regardless, Jae-woo declares that he's going to show Aquila he knows exactly how to enjoy this world. From now on, he's doing whatever he wants because a brand new strategy begins right now. Watching the protagonist behave this way leaves everyone else completely and utterly confused. Cutting back over to the Demon King Odgash. He's absolutely demolishing the scenery around him, giving a raw display of his incredible power. His whole army is cheering him on, hyping up his overwhelming might. Suddenly his daughter speaks up, sensing that something is heading their way. Is it the demon dragon, Odgash questions? But as he lays eyes on the approaching figures, Odgash just scoffs. It's just a human and a goblin. But his daughter is quick to shut that idea down. She tells him they're not the only ones on their way, and right on cue, a massive roar rips through the air. A grin spreads across Odgash's face. The moment he's been waiting for has finally arrived. Shubi shoots a death glare at Odgash and his forces, ordering them to get the hell out of her territory. But Odgash just smirks, claiming he's been looking forward to this for a long time and that he came here just for her. He even tries to pitch her some tempting offer, but Shubi isn't having any of it and shuts him down flat. Her eyes flick over to our protagonist, who gives her the go-ahead. With that, she readies herself for a fight, basically daring her enemy to make the first move. It finally dawns on Odgash that he's just been talking to a wall this whole time. His opponent didn't hear a single word of his grand speech. In a flash, Shubi snatches up Odgash and zips away, leaving the cleanup crew to our boy. Jae-woo knew Odgash's invasion was coming, but it's happening way sooner than in the original timeline. He could just let it play out. But that demon dragon is a key piece on the board for his future plans, so he can't afford to lose her just yet. Besides, he's standing face to face with the continent's #1 beauty, Lady Calione. Talk about an honor. She then dramatically removes her helmet and steps forward, taking command of her army. The sight of her triggers a critical memory for our protagonist. Depending on the player's choices, Calione is a total wildcard. She could become your greatest ally or your worst enemy, and she's even stronger than Pezamut. There's a good reason they call her the Ice Queen. For his grand strategy to work, getting her on his side is non-negotiable. So seizing the moment, Jae-woo lays it on thick, telling Calione she's even more stunning in person. His reward for that line, a spear pointed right at his throat. Both her attendant and Calione herself are ready to run him through. Completely unfazed, our protagonist deadpans. All I want is a word with the princess. Think you could set that up for me? Absolutely furious, the princess's attendant lunges at him. Worried for his master, Kururak jumps right into the line of fire to protect him. Jae-woo thinks to himself how his favorite goblin has gotten incredibly loyal as Kururak shouts at the enemy. If you want to get to my master, you'll have to get through me first. Our protagonist can't help but notice this is a far cry from the goblin who bailed during Shubi's attack. Turning his attention back to the main event, Jae-woo starts to taunt the princess. My servant's loyalty puts yours to absolute shame. In a flash, a whip cracks through the air, completely ensnaring his foe. From the shadows, Hexax emerges a vampire under Jae-woo's complete control. Clearly, he was saving this trump card for the perfect moment, and now he's finally unleashed his servant to take on this threat. But Hexax isn't the only one answering the call to battle against the Dark Nun. Piffenheim has officially entered the fray as well. She vows with deadly intent, I will strike down anyone who dares to lay a hand on my master. Calione is shocked to see the protagonist commanding vampires as if they were mere puppets. On his side, a massive army of the Reborn stands at the ready, and on hers a veritable horde of monstrous beasts. The princess has to admit her opponent has some powerful allies, but she's got an answer for that. At my side stands a legion of demons, all fiercely loyal to Lord Odgash. Turning to her forces, Calione bellows the command, "Charge the enemy. Leave no one standing." At her word, Calione's army surges forward, and in response, the protagonist's own reborn servants rush to meet them head-on. The leaders themselves don't just stand by, they immediately leap into the fray, their powers colliding. In the initial exchange, Calione actually manages to force the protagonist back. She proclaims that not just anyone could block her strike, even putting his skill above that of Pezamut himself. Jae-woo concedes that being acknowledged by the princess is indeed an honor, but he says it's a real shame she's loyal to Odgash, adding that if her true father could see her now, he would weep tears of blood. You see, the protagonist knows her true identity, Lady Calione Raminya Kaimars, the one and only daughter of the former Level 1 Demon Lord Kaimars. Calione's eyes narrow as she asks, "What else do you know about me?" The protagonist just starts laughing, causing her to demand, "What's so funny?" Jae-woo finds it hilarious that she's become so blind she's now following the very person who destroyed her own father. This bombshell leaves Calione utterly stunned and completely bewildered. "What are you talking about?" she demands, her voice shaking. To Calione, her father was the most revered person in the entire world. She always treasured the warmth in his eyes. It gave her a profound sense of peace and inspired other demons to find their own strength. Calione couldn't have been more proud of her father. He was the source of all her happiness, but that all came to a tragic end the day he was taken from her. The tragic end of Kaimars came at the hands of Gorakalgam and Cultus. It was in the aftermath of this tragedy that Odgash took her in. Back then, he swore he despised the other demons with the same burning passion she did. He claimed Lord Kaimars was more than a master. He was his very soul, his truest friend. Odgash painted a picture of a new beginning, promising that when the moment was perfect, he would help her claim her revenge. Snapping back to the present, Calione was furious listening to our hero badmouth her master. Jae-woo acknowledged she was in a tough spot, but urged her to check something out first. With that, he tossed an energy sphere right to Calione. Meanwhile, Odgash was facing off against the demon dragon, bizarrely claiming that romance was the only answer. He was framing this whole chaotic battle as some kind of twisted epic love story. Shubi shot back, accusing him of causing Calione immense pain. But Odgash just retorted that his hands were clean, claiming he wasn't the one who offed Kaimars. He pinned it all on Gorakalgam and Cultus, but Shubi just scoffed, not buying his excuses for a second because she knew the truth. Odgash called her persistent, but then with a smirk, he caved. "You're right. There's no way those two morons could have ever taken down Kaimars." And just like that, the truth about what he'd really done finally came out. He confessed that the moment those two found out, he knew Kaimars' one and only weakness. They were practically salivating at the chance. What Odgash didn't realize was that Calione was hearing every last damning word. That sphere our hero had tossed her, it was actually an image transmitter broadcasting the whole scene. Faced with this devastating truth, Calione was completely shell-shocked. Ever since she'd lost her own father, Odgash had been the father figure in her life. Our hero knew right then that his plan was falling perfectly into place. See, earlier, Jae-woo had set this whole thing up with Shubi. The magical projector was her contribution. He had specifically asked Shubi to use it mid-battle, banking on Odgash spilling his guts while distracted by their fight. Shubi didn't get the reasoning at the time, but Jae-woo stressed that it was absolutely critical to their success. Back in the heat of the moment, Calione had frozen, no longer fighting, just processing the bombshell she'd just heard. Our hero thought to himself that Shubi had followed the plan to a T, which is exactly why it was working. Now the next move was all on him. Through her tears, Calione choked out that her entire reality had been nothing but a long con orchestrated by Odgash. Her mind flashed back to how Odgash had been a constant presence since she was a little girl, and in that moment of crisis, Hexax declared her part of the job was finished. Our hero simply ordered her to hold her ground. Completely beaten, Calione confessed that for 50 years she had unknowingly been taking orders from her real enemy. This truth left her absolutely crushed. Our hero then pointed out that instead of wallowing in despair, she could finally get the revenge she'd always wanted. Starting right then and there, he offered to teach her Kaimar's right of the true name. But what she chose to do with that power would be her decision alone. Calione gasped. "It's been ages since I've heard that name. A spell that channels the immense power of the cosmos, potent enough to injure even an archdemon. That very spell was what made her father the most powerful demon lord of all." But she was quick to point out that only her father ever knew the specifics of the spell. So how could some stranger possibly know about it? Jae-woo thought to himself that he knew everything front to back, all thanks to the strategy guide. This meant he knew Kaimar inside and out, the overwhelming power of the right, his true name, and even his one and only fatal weakness. For the time being, however, he just needed to spin a tale that would get Calione on his side. Our hero explained that he'd read the Chronicles of the Seven Demon Wars, a text that laid out methods for fighting back against the archdemon. And among those methods was Kaimar's Right of the True Name, which had proven to be unbelievably effective. That does make sense. Calione conceded much to our protagonist's satisfaction, but then she insisted she couldn't help him take down Odgash, explaining that the demon was immortal. She recalled a time before Odgash served her father when he took a direct hit from that exact spell. It put him out of commission for a while, but even her father couldn't land the final blow. However, our hero shot back that she was dead wrong. He gestured to the soldiers surrounding her, pointing out they were his vampire army, and that no matter how powerful Calione was, she stood no chance against them alone. Instead, Jae-woo offered her a different path to become his new ally. "So will you join me?" he asked, "or will you die right here, right now?" The ultimatum made Calione's emotions well up. Her mind flashed back to her childhood, to a time she told her father that when she grew up she wanted to be a great demon lord just like him. Her father had told her that if she was serious about it, she would need to become even more powerful than he was. A young Calione had asked if that was even possible. He'd told her yes, absolutely, because he believed in her. After all, she was his own daughter. Snapping back to the present, she looked at the protagonist with tears in her eyes and asked, Can I really defeat Odgash?" Jae-woo was confused, wondering why she was asking him this, with tears streaming down her face. Even his own companions found her sudden shift in demeanor surprising. But Pyfenheim pointed out that in demon years, Calione was still just a kid. Meanwhile, Kururak was starting to think his master had completely forgotten about their other huge problem. Just a short distance away, Odgash was still locked in a fierce battle with Shubi. But even though he was up against a powerful opponent, he wasn't feeling tired or strained in the slightest. He even voiced his disappointment, saying he'd expected a much bigger challenge from her. Shubi, however, just scoffed at his taunts, getting ready to keep the fight going. Shubi's job was to keep the enemy busy, but Odgash was let down when she wouldn't face him head-on. On top of that, her opponent had actually expected her to take him up on his offer. But instead of joining forces, Shubi shot Odgash down and unleashed her powerful dragon's breath. But even with the sheer force of her attack, taking him down wasn't going to be easy. Odgash was way stronger than she'd anticipated. He didn't just block her attack. He launched a counter of his own, clearly feeling confident against his opponent. He declared, "If it's a fight you're looking for, then I'll be happy to give you one." With that, he lunged at Shubi with unbelievable speed, slamming her hard into the ground. After taking that brutal hit, Shubi swore she would make him pay. She then revealed her true form, transforming completely, and attacking Odgash as a full-fledged dragon. The impact was so massive it caused the ground to shake like an earthquake, prompting the protagonist to tell Kururak, "Hey, watch your step." Hexax, who was watching them interact, thought the whole thing was just adorable. In her eyes, the goblin was basically the protagonist's little pet. Pyfenheim came up to her master and pointed out Shubi's mana is surging. She's even breaking through her polymorph, he noted. But his ally couldn't help but wonder, can someone like Lady Shubi really hold her own against an enemy this strong? Jae-woo explained that the constant fighting in Gross Glockner was putting a massive strain on Shubi. Suddenly, an idea hit him. He called out to Calione, telling her he had an important mission just for her. He asked her, "So are you up for the challenge?" Without a moment's hesitation, she replied, "Yes." While nearby, Odgash continued his fierce battle with the dragon. Shubi tried to land a hit, but Odgash wasn't giving her a single opening. "I have to say I'm really enjoying this test of strength," he boasted. In response, Shubi unleashed her fiery breath, but Odgash defended against it without even breaking a sweat. Seeing this, Shubi ramped up her attacks, finally managing to land a powerful blow that dealt some serious damage. But Odgash just claimed it still wasn't enough to take him down, demanding she give him more to satisfy his thirst for battle. Shubi shot back that he was arrogant, declaring that she wasn't even using her full power yet. She warns him that at full strength, her attacks would make a planetary collapse look like child's play. But Odgash isn't fazed in the slightest, retorting that he's got a few tricks of his own. He then swings his massive axe, landing a direct hit on Shubi. The force of the blow is immense, sending her rocketing through the air and carving a path of destruction across the landscape. Looking down at the aftermath, Odgash scoffs, "I didn't think a demon dragon would be this pathetic. I never imagined I'd defeat you this easily." That one devastating hit was enough to force Shubi back into her much weaker form. As Odgash closes in, he reveals, "I've figured out why you're so weak, Shubi. You're bound to this place, and I'm dying to know the reason." But Shubi just glares back, refusing to give him the satisfaction of an answer. Odgash chuckles, "Stubborn to the very end, I see. But it doesn't matter because this is where you die." Just as Odgash raises his weapon for the final blow, our hero appears out of nowhere, stopping him cold and landing a powerful strike of his own. Shubi lets out a sigh of relief, but then chides him. "About time you showed up. You're late." Jae-woo just fires back, "Well, you look like hell." It's a comeback that Shubi definitely doesn't appreciate. Odgash struggles to his feet, and upon seeing the protagonist, he immediately demands, "What did you do to Calione?" Jae-woo just smirks and tells him, "Oh, you'll find out soon enough." With that ominous warning, he gives a signal up to the sky. Calione then descends from above, asking coolly, "Odgash, isn't there something you forgot to tell me?" Odgash is stunned to see Calione realizing she's finally mastered the rite of true naming. He immediately orders her to use that powerful magic against the protagonist. But our hero has heard more than enough of his lies. He tells Calione to hurry up and deal with the man who murdered her father. Odgash frantically denies everything, insisting Kamar was his best friend and that he would never ever harm him. That's when Shubi steps in ready to hit him with the cold, hard truth. She reveals that every word Odgash has said was broadcasted live, meaning Calione has already heard the entire confession. Hearing this, Odgash completely snaps, screaming that it's all a conspiracy against him. Jae-woo shouts to Shubi, ordering her to trap Odgash before he can make a run for it. Shubi immediately taps into her territorial influence, causing massive roots to erupt from the ground and ensnare their cornered enemy. On top of that, a powerful magical seal suddenly erupts, trapping him inside. But Odgash just scoffs, daring all of them to come at him at once if they have the guts. Calione is the first to charge in unleashing a storm of magic against her former ally. Her heart is burning with pure hatred, and she channels every last ounce of that rage into her devastating assault. Odgash gets hit head-on, taking the full force of her magical barrage. After the blast, Calione is left completely exhausted, having dumped all her energy into that single massive attack. But it looks like her enemy got the worst of it, staggering from the sheer power of the impact. A memory of her father brings a wave of emotion, but she has no time to dwell on it, because to her absolute shock, the enemy is already pushing himself back to his feet. Our hero immediately jumps into the fray, refusing to let Calione face this monster alone. Odgash is furious, absolutely enraged that a mere human managed to injure him, but all that anger won't do him any good. Now that he has Odgash's full attention, Jae-woo brilliantly turns the demon's own horn into a weapon against him. He reveals a critical secret: the only way to truly defeat an immortal is by using a piece of their own body against them. And with one precise and devastating strike, he finally brings the seemingly invincible enemy down for good. Right on cue, his system chimes in, displaying the sweet rewards he earned for this epic victory. Meanwhile, Shubi rushes over to Calione, casting some much-needed healing magic on her. She warns Calione that it was a close call. She almost burned out her entire mana supply with that one attack. But the important thing is they won. The monster is finally gone. With her vengeance complete, and the battle over Calione is suddenly lost, unsure of what her purpose is now. That's when our hero steps in, offering her a place in his party. And just like that, Calione realizes she might have finally found a new place to call home. Sometime later, we see that Marin, the guild leader's daughter, has finally woken up. She's complaining about how bitter the medicine is, but her father gently insists that she has to drink it. He reminds her that Lord Valor and his friends risked everything to bring that medicine back from a very dangerous place. Marin then asks if he'll grant her wish once she finishes it all, and her father lovingly agrees. Back with our hero, he brings up their agreement, but the guild leader motions for them to talk somewhere more private away from his daughter. Once they're alone, the protagonist gets straight to the point, asking if the guild leader has handled the debt situation. The guild leader sighs, explaining that he's facing some serious pushback from the debtors. Our hero is confused, asking why they're putting up such a fight about it. And the guild leader reveals the likely culprit behind the trouble, the Elector of Saxony. In the last episode, the Elector met with the guild master, making it clear that the debtors were some of his biggest VIP clients, so he wasn't on board with their deal. He also made a point of mentioning their guilds had been allies for a long time. So if the merchant could just set up a meeting for the Elector of Saxony, he swore he could turn the whole situation around. It finally clicks for Jae-woo that they're raising such a stink because they're afraid the merchant's connection to Saxony will vanish once the debt is paid off. To our hero, it's no wonder those scumbags from Lider were acting so out of line. If this had just been a face-off between the Emperor and the House of Byron, it would have been an even match. But dragging the Elector of Saxony into the mess makes things infinitely worse. He finally understands why Valpergus is so on edge and immediately starts trying to figure out a way to help her. Seeing our protagonist's concern, the merchant suggests they try a different approach to break the deadlock. But Jae-woo cuts right to the chase, asking the merchant, "So are you any good at making deals?" Elsewhere, at a noble's estate, word arrives that Saxony plans to move against them. The nobleman cries that if his family had just accepted the debt transfer, they could have at least bought more time with an extension. But now he wails, "We don't even have that." The messenger informs him that on their end there was nothing else they could possibly do. So the noble orders his servant to race to the capital immediately, even if it means begging on his hands and knees before the emperor. He makes it clear that this problem must be solved by any means necessary, and the servant isn't to return until it's handled. At another point, our hero's system pings him with an alert that his summon undead skill proficiency has gone up. Now he's able to summon his allies anytime, day or night. To test it out, the protagonist calls out for Pyfenheim. In an instant, she appears in the middle of the day with no problems whatsoever. Jae-woo announces that she and the other vampires have officially become true daywalkers. Because of this, he entrusts her with a very special mission. The protagonist hands over a document instructing his ally to deliver it to a man named Reeb Saltz. He makes sure to emphasize that the document is critical, so she has to be extremely careful when she hands it off. A short time later, the guildmaster arrives to announce that everything Lord Valor requested for his trip is ready to go. He shows off an incredible carriage built by a master artisan, bragging that only a handful of top-tier nobles have anything like it. He explains that he had to pull some strings with a contact at a client's company just to get it. He also covered the payment for the herbs and threw in some travel funds, so Valor should be more than taken care of. Still, he can't help but ask, what in the world do you plan on doing with such an extravagant item? Jae-woo just smirks and says, who knows, maybe I'll use it to knock some sense into the heads of those who opposed our agreement. Just then, Marin shows up to see them off. Our hero tells her that even though she's feeling better, she should still take it easy for a bit. In response, the little girl announces that she has a gift for Valor. And then she catches him completely off guard with a kiss on the cheek. It wasn't just our protagonist. Everyone standing there was floored by her bold move. Marin explains that it was her way of saying thank you. After saying their goodbyes, the girl and her father start heading home. On the way, Marin reminds her dad about his promise to grant her one wish. She then drops a bombshell declaring, my wish is to become Lord Valor's bride. She goes on to say that she's been completely smitten with him ever since they met. Her father, on the other hand, is anything but happy about this development. Meanwhile, miles away, our protagonist and his crew press on with their journey. Calione remarks that Marin is quite the little warrior, surprised she'd pull such a bold stunt to win over the protagonist. Still, she adds that it seems Lord Valor is more interested in cash than anything else. Jae-woo shoots back that they just don't get it. He insists that's just the way the world works. Everything revolves around money, but when he catches the disapproving glares from Calione's nuns, he starts to squirm. Luckily for him, a call comes in from Cobalt, who's ecstatic to hear that Valor made it back from Gross Glockner alive. Our hero assures him he's doing just fine and is still on the mission. By the way, Cobalt asks have our enemies cleared out yet. He says his raven spotted their departure right away, which is why he's calling. The intel just came in, Jae-woo replies. That was fast, what'd you find out? Cobalt tells him that everything is going down exactly as Valor predicted. Sure enough, the enemies took off for the capital this morning and they looked seriously ticked off. Our protagonist admits with a smirk that he might have had something to do with that. He then hints that there are plenty more surprises in store for them. Cobalt also mentions that apparently Roland of the Rose Demons is in the capital right now. Hearing that our hero asks him to start spreading a rumor around the capital, Cobalt remarks, you're as thorough as always, aren't you? Jae-woo replies that this is exactly what their alliance was made for. Cobalt agrees, promising a hefty reward, but then abruptly says he's ending the call. Our hero playfully teases him, hey, no need to get all flustered. Trusting him completely, his ally simply says, I'm counting on you. Hanging up now. Once the call is over, our protagonist cringes, realizing he just said something pretty awkward himself. Meanwhile, Calione is stunned to see him talking with Cobalt of Pluzon, realizing his network is way bigger than she ever thought. On that note, our hero announces that he's got an idea. Getting a little flustered, Calione asks, why are you staring at me like that? Jae-woo reassures her, explaining that she just needs to do something for the team's benefit. A little while later in Vienna, the imperial capital, the streets are buzzing as people gossip about the latest rumors. Word on the street is that Kaimar's daughter is visiting the city. They're also talking about how Odgash took out her father only for her to get her revenge and take him down. The gossips are even saying that Kaimar's daughter unleashed her family's secret technique on her foe. On top of all that, every rumor agrees she's an absolute knockout. Right in the middle of all this excitement, our hero's carriage pulls up and the crowd instantly assumes it's Kaimar's daughter. Mortified Calione turns to our hero and asks, do we really have to do this? He just nods and says yes, claiming that Calione's face itself is a strategic weapon. Calione shoots back that the only weapons she's familiar with are swords and battle axes, but he just chides her. Someone in a dress that gorgeous shouldn't be saying such rough things. The young woman confesses she hates being the center of attention and feels super awkward with this whole crowd waiting for her. Plus, she adds she has no idea how to act all prim and proper. Jae-woo just tells her, don't worry, it's a piece of cake. All you have to do is rest one hand gracefully on your cheek and place the other one lightly over your knees. Then you just have to give them the most captivating look you can manage. Nail that and you'll be golden. Annoyed, Calione snaps back that he knows perfectly well she's a commander, the leader of an entire army. She reminds him that her usual uniform is battle armor, not some frilly dress. Doing what you're asking is going to completely ruin my reputation as a commander, she protests. But our hero just calmly points out that she's totally free to leave his crew and go her own way. But if you want to stick around, he warns you've got to play by my rules. Backed into a corner, Calione is out of options. So she does exactly as he says, placing one hand elegantly on her cheek and the other over her knees. And then she pulls off the most crucial part, striking an enchanting pose that perfectly highlights her breathtaking beauty. The moment they see her, everyone's jaws hit the floor. Even though she's flustered, Calione holds her pose perfectly. It doesn't take long for every man in the city to be singing her praises. Not used to such a warm reception, Calione is genuinely startled by the public's overwhelming adoration. Not far from there, Roland is gathering her entire staff. She announces that she is expecting an extremely important visitor. She expresses her deep regret that they aren't at her Rose Palace because to her, this person is more important than the Emperor himself, more important than any demon lord. For that reason, she is counting on every single one of them for their help. She demands that the chefs prepare the most delicious meal of their entire careers, and she instructs the maids to make this place cleaner and more beautiful than the Rose Palace itself. One of her attendants approaches, announcing that the visitor's arrival is just moments away. Roland then tells everyone to give it their absolute all. "This is the most important day of my life," she exclaims. Meanwhile, she thinks to herself, "I am doing all of this for my Lord Kymars." Roland's beauty and enchanting voice could capture any man's heart. This made her the envy of all other demons, but her true nature was far more complex. With her gift for eloquent speech, she wielded diplomacy as a weapon, transforming Rosarent into a powerful nation. This is how she earned the title, the Bride of Rosarent. But there was a secret that nobody knew. The true story behind her prestigious position. Once she had gone to Kymars telling him he was the only one she could ever truly open her heart to. Believing her feelings would never change, Roland pleaded for him to accept her. But young Calione suddenly interrupted them, asking her father, "Who is this beautiful lady?" Her father simply told her that Roland was a colleague. So Calione presented Roland with a gift, explaining that she had made it with her uncle Odgash. "Since you're so pretty," Calione added, "I'll give you the best cookies I made." In that instant, Roland understood the reason for Kymars's rejection. His heart was already completely taken by someone else. After that, she went up to Princess Calione and asked if someday she could have the honor of the princess naming a castle for her. Having Lady Calione choose the name for my castle would be a tremendous honor. Moved by Roland's stunning beauty, the princess came up with the name the Palace of Roses. Roland adored the name, and true to her word, later constructed a magnificent castle bearing the name the princess had suggested. Back in the present day, Roland and Calione were finally reunited. "Since Lord Kymars has passed," she began, "I made it my top priority to see his only living heir, his daughter," and with that she gracefully knelt before the princess. Calione was obviously impressed by the elaborate welcome that had been prepared for her. "Oh, if only we were at the Palace of Roses," Roland lamented. "I could have offered a much more magnificent feast," but Calione assured her that the spread before them was more than sufficient. Roland also expressed her deep gratitude to Lord Valor for returning the princess whom everyone had believed was gone for good. "I've heard from Count Knighter Byron," she continued, "that Valor has a knack for overcoming challenges in the most unconventional ways." She even hinted at a strange connection between them, but our protagonist quickly changed the subject. Roland sighed with a hint of regret. "I do love a good romance, but since you insist," she conceded, "we can certainly get down to business." Our hero then revealed the real purpose of his visit, to deliver a message from Philip the Elector of Steel. A wave of relief washed over Roland, knowing Philip was alive, but she immediately asked, "Can I see him in person?" Jae-woo shook his head. "Unfortunately, that's not going to be possible. Philip isn't in any condition to be receiving visitors right now." "In that case," Roland said, "let's cut to the chase." The protagonist relayed Philip's message. "He cannot make any public moves at this time. Therefore, he has appointed Valor as his proxy with full authority, and he requests your assistance, Roland, in retaking the pulse in the near future. Even if it means stretching the truth for now, I absolutely have to get Roland on my side. She must become my ally." Considering Margarita was afflicted by the curse of the one who dwells in the grave, it's obvious Pezamut is also getting backing from the Great Lord. Margarita by herself won't be enough to take him down. I can't personally eliminate someone who's under the Great Lord's protection. That's precisely why getting Roland on board is absolutely essential. With her fighting alongside me, I can finally put Pezamut in his place. And with that, Jae-woo finished delivering Philip's message. Roland had listened to the entire message completely captivated. "However, before I agree," she stated, "I have one condition." She explained that Lord Valor had to be aware of her current predicament. Our hero quickly figured out she was talking about the economic blockade. Because of this, Roland pressed, insisting that if Lord Valor truly spoke for the Emperor, then her words couldn't be ignored. Jae-woo simply told her not to sweat it. "The stage is already set," he confidently assured her. Meanwhile, over at the Imperial Palace, a desperate servant was begging the Emperor for help, only to have his plea completely shot down. Emperor Franz IV just coldly declared, "I regret this." He claimed that his heart softened the moment he heard about their situation. Yet the servant insisted that there had to be some kind of official order to deal with this. The Emperor, not even bothering to hide the mountains of gold piled around his throne, refused to budge. He argued that despite the debt agreement, they were generous enough to offer a little tribute to the Empire. "Besides," he added, "I've heard the Valia Merchants Guild is backing the debtors anyway." And so the servant sent by his master to get the Emperor to stop the agreement was now completely out of options. Now he would have to go back to his master and admit he had failed. Right at that moment, one of the Emperor's soldiers appeared. "Your Majesty, Lord Valar has just arrived." The Emperor immediately gave the order to let him in. As he walked into the throne room, our hero announced, "It is a great honor to be in your presence, Your Majesty." He introduced himself as Valorstead Valar and pledged his service to the Empire. "I've been expecting you," the Emperor said, "and don't pay any attention to this man here. He's just a messenger boy," he added dismissively. Even so, our hero requested a private audience with the Emperor. The Emperor reluctantly agreed, and the noble's envoy was immediately removed from the throne room. But instead of leaving with any dignity, the man begged the Emperor to reconsider, though it was completely useless. To add insult to injury, as the man was being dragged out, our protagonist gave him a little smile and a wave goodbye. This, of course, left the envoy absolutely livid with rage. Far from the capital in Odgash's castle, the defeated demons were recounting their failure to Odgash's enraged daughter. She was completely furious, reminding them she had wanted to go with them in the first place. "If I'd been there," she fumed, "I would have handled things a lot better than Calione did." In the middle of her angry rant, a servant showed up with urgent news, but she was way too furious to even listen. "Your ladyship," the servant urged, "the Emperor has just declared an economic blockade against our entire region." She looked utterly baffled. Matters of diplomacy were definitely not her forte. The servant, anxious about how she'd take the news, looked a little lost himself. "So what does that actually mean?" she finally asked. Meanwhile, our protagonist finally gets some one-on-one time with the Emperor. Jae-woo remarks that gazing upon the capital's thriving landscape, he's truly in awe of His Majesty's magnificent accomplishments. He adds that he barely feels worthy enough to stand here, but the Emperor quickly tells him to drop the formalities. The Emperor reflects on how, in just a short time since Valor entered the political arena, he's skillfully used Kamars's daughter to soften anti-demon feelings in key regions. He even managed to flip them into allies, leading the Emperor to believe Valor is here with a purpose, and he's determined to find out what it is. Still, he sees Valor as nothing more than a mouse cornered by a predator, likely thinking he can talk his way out of anything. But in his arrogance, the Emperor can't imagine being outplayed by some newly minted hero, so he cuts to the chase and asks our protagonist, "What is it you really came here to say?" In reply, our protagonist humbly requests that the economic blockade on Rosarint be lifted and instead placed upon the domain of Odgash the Demon King. The Emperor demands to know what's in it for him, pointing out that a simple friendship treaty with the Rose Kingdom is hardly enough incentive. On top of that, he declares that the ancient Black Widow Roland holds no interest for him whatsoever. But our protagonist insists that she will carry out any order His Majesty gives. He then presents a document to the Emperor, which instantly piques His Majesty's curiosity. The document reveals that Roland herself has agreed to pay 10,000 florins a year. Despite this, the Emperor questions our protagonist, asking if there's any proof the document is even real. Jae-woo explains that right now Odgash is the single most despised villain on the entire continent. Therefore, if the Emperor blockades the Demon King's territory, he'll be hailed as a hero by the entire world. The Emperor has to admit the young hero Calione is certainly intriguing. But even so, he argues there isn't enough justification, flatly stating that politics isn't a game of feelings. An annoyed Valor thinks to himself that the Emperor wasn't singing that tune when he blockaded Rosarint just because Roland refused to pay him tribute. But then he speaks up again, reminding the Emperor that Odgash died in the recent Great War. His followers are now gearing up to declare war on the demonic dragon. The seeds of conflict are still there, and the citizens of the Empire are living in fear. Because of this, he states, "It's time for you to make a decision." The Emperor remarks that Valor certainly has a silver tongue. He feels like the hero could talk him into just about anything. Jae-woo plays along and thanks him, but on the inside, he knows he doesn't possess any special gift like that. The truth is, his real power lies in his incredible ability to persuade people. Valor claims that all he wants is to repay His Majesty's grace with a small gesture of his unwavering loyalty. But this only seems to enrage the Emperor, who roars that he'll never fall for such sweet-sounding, comforting lies. He then demands to know if Valor actually dares to test the patience of the man who rules the entire continent. Without missing a beat, he orders his guards to get Valor out of his sight immediately. Our hero is totally blindsided, wondering what just happened and why the Emperor is suddenly acting this way. A little while later at Roland's party, Calione is feeling super awkward as she watches her servants happily chow down while she's the only one not having any fun. Even the Emperor is having the time of his life, announcing that he's never enjoyed a conversation more than the one he just had with Lord Valor. Our protagonist is still struggling to understand the Emperor's complete 180, but the Emperor then declares that from this day forward, Valor is to call him Uncle. He makes it clear he won't respond to any of those stuffy formal titles anymore. Jae-woo decides to just go with it and calls him Uncle, which makes the Emperor beam with joy, saying it sounds much better and is way more pleasant to hear. Meanwhile, outside, the servant who got kicked out of the palace is absolutely seething with jealousy as he watches the Emperor getting so chummy with Valor. He fumes to himself, insisting that that spot by the Emperor's side should have been his. He just can't figure out how Valor managed to succeed where he had failed so miserably. All of a sudden, one of his accomplices speaks up, questioning why they need to kidnap Valpergus. Another cloaked figure agrees, warning that the plan is way too risky and that they should think about another way. But the ringleader of the group shoots back that it's not off the table at all. He argues that if they don't go through with this, their entire family could be destroyed. He insists they have to proceed with extreme caution, but also with absolute precision. Back with our hero, he finally stumbles back to his room feeling completely drained. Calione quips that this is what he gets for accepting every single drink that was offered to him. Jae-woo just laughs and calls it a necessary part of socializing. He boasts that back in his prime he could easily handle 7 rounds of drinks without breaking a sweat. But right now all he wants to do is crash and get some sleep. But just then Cobalt calls him frantically explaining that something awful has happened. Our hero, groaning that his head is pounding, tries to blow him off and hang up the phone. But Cobalt urgently insists that this is not the time for jokes. He warns that it's about Valpergus pleading with Valor to take this seriously. At that very moment, over in Odgash Castle, the Demon King's daughter declares that there is no more time to waste. She's burning with the desire to avenge her father, and she wants it now. Her name is Margaret von Tash, and she swears that to get revenge for her father, she'll devour the demonic dragon itself if she has to. She issues a command to every warrior able to fight prepare for war. Her orders are clear: train relentlessly with no breaks until every last one of them is battle-ready. She intends to march on Grossglockner at the earliest possible moment. However, the princess's attendant suggests it might be wiser to avoid acting so recklessly. He points out that the emperor has already imposed an economic blockade there, and to make matters worse, Valpergus recently resurrected Saint Margaret. On top of that, the blockade on Rosarent has been lifted, so Roland won't just sit back and watch, which only complicates their situation. For these reasons, he strongly urges her to proceed with caution as they carry out their plans. But Margaret von Tash is completely unmoved, declaring that absolutely nothing will stand in her way, least of all the weak. Meanwhile, Valpergus finds herself a captive. "Why are you doing this?" she demands of her captors, and the conspirator reveals their true purpose. "Our goal is to persuade the emperor," he explains before boasting about their stronghold. It has an ironclad defense completely surrounded by the lake. Even if the Byrons were to attack, they'd have a hell of a time trying to breach it. He concludes with absolute certainty, "There's simply no way our plan can fail." Valpergus just scoffs, calling them fools for thinking mere gates could ever protect them. Irritated, her captor snaps back. "Silence. You're making way too much noise for a hostage." "Are you waiting for that scoundrel Valar to show up?" he sneers. Just thinking about the humiliation he suffered at Valar's hands makes his blood boil with rage. Valpergus shoots back. "You'll face a humiliation far worse than that once I get out of here. There's nothing you can do in your current condition," the enemy counters. "You're completely on your own." But just then, another conspirator rushes in, shouting about an invasion. Outside, the protagonist and his group have already completely surrounded the fortress. Hexax reports in all units are assembled, except for Pyfenheim, who's currently on a special assignment. "We're ready to attack on your command." Even Kururak asks if he should jump in on the action. "Quiet everyone," the protagonist commands. "Our mission is twofold: rescue Valpergus and annihilate Ritter. They've crossed every line imaginable." He adds, "I was perfectly willing to let them be so long as they stayed out of my way. But now, I'm going to see this hunt through to the bitter end." And with that, they launch a full-blown assault on the enemy's location. Our hero looks at Hexax and lays out the plan. "I've got this flank you circle around." Kururak pleads to stick with his master, but Hexax cuts him off, saying, "Actually, you and I are going together." Even our protagonist backs up the order, telling Kururak to go with Hexax and be her support. Kururak is absolutely not on board with this plan. He's completely petrified of Hexax. Jae-woo lets out a frustrated sigh, thinking, "I don't have time for this cowardice, we have to move now." Meanwhile, inside the prison chamber, the captors are watching the chaos erupt outside. But the moment the lead conspirator spots our protagonist, his face twists with pure, unadulterated hatred. He's still thirsty for revenge, grabbing a sword and thinking, "Just imagining what I'm going to do when I get my hands on him." The thought alone is so satisfying, he mutters. Fueled by that thought, he charges headfirst toward his sworn enemy. The Ritter leader barks at his men, ordering them not to let their comrade fight alone. At the same time, Valpergus realizes who's come for her. The protagonist is here to save her. A thought flashes through her mind. "He's always the one who comes to my rescue." She recalls, however, since the day they first met, he's never failed to be there for her. But that memory is instantly replaced by a burning rage at her own helplessness in this situation. Valpergus starts shaking with uncontrollable fury, and her sheer rage begins to crack the very pillar she's bound to. Elsewhere, Ritter fumes to himself. "Everything was going perfectly until that damn servant showed up and ruined it all. I knew I should have handled things at the capital myself." Suddenly, a sharp noise snaps him out of his thoughts, startling him. And it's not just the noise. He looks over and realizes in horror that the Countess of Burns has broken free. He can't believe it, wondering, how in the world did that paladin shatter a reinforced barrier? Still, he scoffs, thinking she's useless without a sword, and confidently moves in for the first strike. He could not have been more wrong, and he's about to be caught completely off guard. Valpergus doesn't just counter his attack. She meets it with so much force that she shatters his sword into pieces. A flash of panic hits Ritter, but he grits his teeth, telling himself there's no way he's losing this fight. His arrogance costs him dearly as Valpergus plants a brutal right hook squarely on his chin. The blow is so hard that it sends one of his teeth flying. Valpergus stands over him and declares, "I can't just keep waiting for others to save me." She's determined to finish this enemy herself right here and now. Ritter desperately tries to argue his case, but he can barely get the words out. All he can manage to stammer is that he wasn't even involved in this scheme. Valpergus just scoffs, telling him she couldn't care less. But right before she can make her move, Ritter shrieks, "Monster!" It's awfully rude to call a lady a monster. Valpergus shoots back, but then she suddenly spots something moving towards them. That's when an actual honest-to-goodness monster arrives on the scene. Ritter lets out a crazed laugh. "My monster has finally awakened. Now it's time for one monster to face off against another." He calls the massive brute Igor and orders him to be his bodyguard. Meanwhile, back with our hero, he asks, "Am I going the right way?" "You are," Kubalt replies. "I'm watching through the familiars right now, and a guy named Igor just showed up over there." He explains Igor is the human weapon they've been working on. He's the same monster who was responsible for that huge massacre at Ritter's castle. A truly savage creature, Jae-woo mutters, his brow furrowing. This isn't part of the game's original storyline. Right at that moment, a voice calls out, "Valar Stead." "Valar!" Our hero thanks Kubalt for the intel, but says he has to cut the call short to deal with a new problem. The traitor from the Ritter family finally steps forward. At last he snarls, "I'm going to get my revenge." But while he's busy running his mouth, he completely fails to notice that his back is wide open. In a flash, a shadow summoned by our hero smacks him right over the head. He's knocked out cold, eating dirt as he face plants into the ground. Jae-woo mutters to himself, "What a complete waste of time. I need to hurry." Back at the other fight, Igor launches a ferocious attack on the paladin. Valpergus, however, counters his assault in her own unique style. She skillfully sidesteps his every move using her superior speed to stay one step ahead. But as they fight, she senses something oddly familiar about Igor. "Were you the one who ambushed me and dragged me here?" she demands. "Either way," she declares as a member of the Valperga convent, "I can't afford to let my guard down." This just sends Igor into an even bigger rage. Valpergus is completely baffled by this sudden switch in his attitude. Ritter chimes in, explaining that the paladin said the one word she shouldn't have. He screams that Igor absolutely despises the Valperga convent. It looks like the Countess's problems just got a whole lot bigger. Elsewhere, Margaret von Tash was complaining about the terrible food in their crummy camp. Her servant had to explain that they were broke, and things would only get better once they rescued Lord von Tash. They were in such a tight spot that they were even forced to sell their castle because of the financial blockade. When Margaret asked about the army, her servant informed her that the soldiers had gotten some of their pay and were receiving full medical care. But she just shot back that they should be doing nothing but training, ignoring her servant's reminder that they needed medical attention. She just blamed the whole thing on her father, saying he'd spoiled all of his servants. The servant muttered that things were much better when Lord Odgash was in charge, right before an annoyed Margaret demanded he bring her a real piece of meat. The story then cuts to a flashback of a young Igor attempting to join the Valperga convent. A nun explained that they proved their faith through physical strength, but looking at the scrawny kid, she doubted he could even lift a dumbbell, much less handle their training. And while she admired his passion, his complete lack of muscle was a huge problem on top of the tiny detail that they only accepted women. I mean, it was a convent after all. Igor has held on to that grudge ever since. Back in the present, he's attacking Valperga for the simple reason that she brought up that traumatic childhood memory. Ritter just starts cracking up, saying that nobody can stop Igor once he gets this worked up. But then Igor turns on Ritter, who becomes the next target for saying the convent's name too. Valperga couldn't figure out why he hated the convent so much, but she could tell his punches were filled with a deep-seated sorrow. Knowing she couldn't keep dodging forever, she finally went on the offensive, meeting his fists with her own. Igor felt the raw power behind her punch, which only made him even more furious. His mind flashed back to the past, hearing the nun's words over and over and remembering his vow to train and get stronger. But that brutal training regimen had an unfortunate side effect. He started losing more and more of his hair. It left a permanent mark on him, but on the bright side, he ended up with an incredibly jacked physique. Valperga lands a solid blow to his midsection, but it doesn't seem to do any damage at all. So she aimed for his face instead and quickly realized she'd found his weak spot. After laying him out cold, she declares that she'll fight him again when his fists no longer carry that hesitation. But as she feels the entire fortress shaking, Valperga starts to wonder if maybe she went a little overboard. Back with our hero, he felt the ground shake and wondered if an earthquake was hitting. Without warning, the ceiling overhead came crashing down, almost burying him alive. But he reacted in a flash, whipping out his magic sword and slicing through the falling rubble before it could touch him. Still, the sheer volume of falling debris managed to demolish a huge section of the castle. His path forward was now blocked, but our hero muttered that he didn't have time for this nonsense. Right then, Kubalt's voice reached him, reporting that Valperga was safe, but the area she was in definitely wasn't. He sent a bat to act as a guide, telling him to rescue his friend and get the heck out of there. Meanwhile, Valperga was convinced that Valor was on his way and knew she had to find him fast. After all, she needed to tell him what she couldn't bring herself to say last time. In that brief moment of distraction, a huge chunk of rock came hurtling down toward her head. But just in the nick of time, our hero appeared, cleaving the massive stone in two. Valperga's heart soared with relief and joy at the sight of him. And even with everything falling apart around them, our protagonist felt the exact same way. His eyes, however, landed on a defeated foe on the ground, and he asked who it was. Kubalt's bat immediately chimed in, frantically insisting they had no time for questions. The entire place was about to come down on top of them. As they took off running, Valperga couldn't help but be amazed that such a huge guy could be stored in a tiny glove. Our hero had placed Igor into his inventory, absolutely refusing to leave the guy behind. Even though he never said a word, Valperga could see that Lord Valor had a truly kind heart. Right in the middle of their frantic escape, she suddenly announced she had something she needed to tell him. Han Juhu told her it could wait until they were somewhere safe, but the Countess insisted that it couldn't. She then confessed that Valperga wasn't her real name. Her true name was actually Chartier. Han Juhu commented on what a beautiful name it was right before the grim realization hit him they weren't going to make it out in time. Val saw it too, but a split second later she was struck by a wave of collapsing debris. Han Juhu lunged to help her, but he was also slammed by the falling wreckage. The bat started to panic, but our hero's voice cut through the chaos, declaring that he was still alive. Even though the ceiling had caved in, he had somehow made it out by the skin of his teeth, and so had Valperga. A moment passed as they both took in the fact that they were against all odds. Okay. Just then, Hexax flew in, and our hero shouted that her timing couldn't have been more perfect. He immediately used her wings to lift off, reaching out to grab Valperga's hand as they ascended. Just as Hexax declared the whole place would be rubble in 5 seconds, the protagonist desperately tried to drag her to safety, but Valperga was losing her grip on his hand. Moments later, the entire castle came crashing down. A massive cloud of dust completely swallowed the area. Against all odds, however, everyone had managed to get out just in the nick of time. Not only that, but by entrusting the protagonist with her true name, her affection for him had skyrocketed.